Chapter 13 of The Flirt, by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Mr. Trumble's offices were heralded by a neat blazon upon the principal door, Wade J. Trumbull, Mortgages and Loans, and, the gentleman thus comfortably proclaimed, emerging from that door upon a September noontide, burlesqued a start of surprise at sight of a figure unlocking an opposite door which exhibited the name Ray Vilas, and below it the cryptic phrase, Probate Law. "Water," murmured Mr. Trumble, affecting to faint. "You ain't going in there, are you, Ray?" He followed the other into the office, and stood leaning against a bookcase, with his hands in his pockets, while Vilas raised the two windows, which were obscured by a film of smoke deposit. There was a thin coat of fine sifted dust over everything. "Better not sit down, Ray," continued Trumble, warningly. "You'll spoil your clothes, and you might get a client. That word probate on the door ain't going to keep 'em out forever. You recognize the old place, I s'pose? You must have been here at least twice since you moved in. What's the matter? Dick Lindley hasn't missionaried you into any idea of working, has he? Oh, no, I see the Richfield Hotel bar has closed. You've managed to drink it all at last." "Have you heard how old man Madison is to-day?" asked Ray, dusting his fingers with a handkerchief. "Somebody told me yesterday he was about the same. He's not going to get well." "How do you know?" Ray spoke quickly. "Stroke too severe. People never recover." "Oh, yes, they do, too." Trumble began hotly, "I beg to but checked himself, manifesting a slight confusion. "That is, I know they don't. Old Madison may live a while, if you call that getting well, but he'll never be the same man he was. Dr. Sloane says it was a bad stroke. Says it was induced by heat prostration and excitement." "Excitement!" he repeated with a sour laugh. "Yep, I expect a man could get all the excitement he wanted in that house, especially if he was her daddy. Poor old man, I don't believe he's got $5,000 in the world, and look how she dresses." Ray opened a compartment beneath one of the bookcases, and found a bottle and some glasses. "Aha!" he muttered. "Our janitor doesn't drink, I perceive. Join me?" Mr. Trumble accepted, and Ray explained, cheerfully, "Richard Lindley's got me so cowed I'm afraid to go near any of my old joints. You see, he trails me. The scoundrel has kept me sober for whole days at a time, and I've been mortified, having old friends see me in that condition. So I have to sneak up here to my own office to drink to Cora, now and then. You mustn't tell him. What's she been doing to you lately?" The little man addressed grew red with the sharp, resentful memory. "Oh, nothing. Just struck me in the face with her parasol on the public street, that's all." He gave an account of his walk to church with Cora. "I'm through with that girl," he exclaimed vindictively, in conclusion. "It was the damnedest thing you ever saw in your life, right in broad daylight, in front of the church. And she laughed when she did it. You'd have thought she was knocking a puppy out of her way. She can't do that to me twice, I tell you. What the devil do you see to laugh at?" "You'll be around," returned his companion, refilling the glasses. "Asking for more, the first chance she gives you. Here's her health." "I don't drink it," cried Mr. Trumble angrily. "And I'm through with her for good, I tell you. I'm not your kind. I don't let a girl like that upset me till I can't think of anything else, and go making such an ass of myself that the whole town gabbles about it. Cora Madison's seen the last of me, I'll thank you to notice. She's never been half decent to me, cut dances with me all last winter, kept me hanging round the outskirts of every crowd she was in, stuck me with Laura and her mother every time she had a chance, then has the nerve to try to use me, so's she can make a bigger hit with a new man. You can bet your head I'm through. She'll get paid, though. Oh, she'll get paid for it." "How?" laughed Ray. It was a difficult question. "You wait and see," responded the threatener feebly. "Just wait and see. She's wild about this Corliss, I tell you," he continued with renewed vehemence. "She's crazy about him. She's lost her head at last." "You mean he's going to avenge you?" "No, I don't, though he might if she decided to marry him." "Do you know," said Ray slowly, glancing over his glass at his nervous companion, "it doesn't strike me that Mr. Valentine Corliss has much the air of a marrying man." "He has the air to me," observed Mr. Trumble, "of a darned bad lot. But I have to hand it to him. He's a wizard. He's got something besides his good looks a man that could get Cora Madison interested in business in oil. Cora Madison! How do you suppose—" His companion began to laugh again. "You don't really suppose he talked his oil business to her, do you, Trumble?" "He must have. Else how could she—" "Oh, no. Cora herself never talks upon any subject but one. She never listens to any other, either." "Then how in thunder did he—" "If Cora asks you if you think it will rain," interrupted Vilas, "doesn't she really seem to be asking, 'Do you love me? How much?' Suppose Mr. Corliss is an expert in the same line. Course he can talk about oil." "He strikes me," said Trumble, "as just about the slickest customer that ever hit this town. I like Richard Lindley, and I hope he'll see his $50,000 again. I wouldn't have given Corliss 30 cents." "Why do you think he's a crook?" "I don't say that," returned Trumble. "All I know about him is that he's done some of the finest work to get $50,000 put in his hands that I ever heard of. And all anybody knows about him is that he lived here 17 years ago, and comes back claiming to know where there's oil in Italy. He shows some maps and papers and gets cablegrams signed Moliterno. Then he talks about selling the old Corliss house here, where the Madisons live, and putting the money into his oil company. He does that to sound plausible, but I have good reason to know that house was mortgaged to its full value within a month after his aunt left it to him. He'll not get a cent if it's sold. That's all. And he's got Cora Madison so crazy over him that she makes life a hell for poor old Lindley until he puts all he's saved into the bubble. The scheme may be all right. How do I know? There's no way to tell without going over there, and Corliss won't let anybody do that. Oh, he's got a plausible excuse for it. But I'm sorry for Lindley. He's so crazy about Cora, he's soft. And she's so crazy about Corliss, she's soft. Well, I used to be crazy about her myself, but I'm not soft. I'm not the Lindley kind of loon, thank heaven." "What kind are you, Trumble?" asked Ray mildly. "Not your kind either," retorted the other, going to the door. "She cut me on the street the other day. She's quit speaking to me. If you've got any money, why don't you take it over to the hotel and give it to Corliss? She might start speaking to you again. I'm going to lunch." He slammed the door behind him. Ray Vilas, left alone, elevated his heels to the sill, and stared out of the window a long time at the gravelled roof which presented little of interest. He replenished his glass and his imagination frequently, the latter being so stirred that when, about 3 o'clock, he noticed the inroads he had made upon the bottle, tears of self-pity came to his eyes. "Poor little drunkard," he said aloud. "Go ahead and do it. Isn't anything you won't do." And, having washed his face at a basin in a corner, he set his hat slightly upon one side, picked up a walking stick, and departed jauntily, and, to the outward eye, presentably sober. Mr. Valentine Corliss would be glad to see him, the clerk at the Richfield Hotel reported, after sending up a card, and upon Ray's following the card, Mr. Valentine Corliss in person confirmed the message with considerable amusement and a cordiality in which there was some mixture of the quizzical. He was the taller, and the robust manliness of his appearance, his splendid health and boxer's figure offered a sharp contrast to the superlatively lean tippler. Corliss was humorously aware of his advantage. His greeting seemed really to say, "Hello, my funny bug, here you are again." though the words of his salutation were entirely courteous, and he followed it with a hospitable offer. "No," said Vilas, "I won't drink with you." He spoke so gently that the form of his refusal, usually interpreted as truculent, escaped the other's notice. He also declined a cigar, apologetically asking permission to light one of his own cigarettes. Then, as he sank into a velour-covered chair, apologized again for the particular attention he was bestowing upon the apartment, which he recognized as one of the suites de luxe of the hotel. "Parlor, bedroom and bath," he continued with a melancholy smile, "and lachrymæ, and a reading from Homer. Sometimes they have 'The Music Lesson,' or 'Winter Scene,' or 'A Neapolitan Fisher Lad,' instead of lachrymæ. But they always have 'a reading from Homer.' When you opened the door, a moment ago, I had a very strong impression that something extraordinary would some time happen to me in this room." "Well," suggested Corliss, "you refused a drink in it." "Even more wonderful than that," said Ray, glancing about the place curiously. "It may be a sense of something painful that already has happened here perhaps long ago, before your occupancy. It has a pathos." "Most hotel rooms have had something happen in them," said Corliss lightly. "I believe the managers usually change the door numbers if what happens is especially unpleasant. Probably they change some of the rugs also." "I feel," Ray paused, frowning, "I feel as if someone had killed himself here." "Then no doubt some of the rugs have been changed." "No doubt," the caller laughed, and waved his hand in dismissal of the topic. "Well, Mr. Corliss," he went on, shifting to a brisker tone, "I have come to make my fortune too. You are a Midas. Am I of sufficient importance to be touched?" Valentine Corliss gave him sidelong an almost imperceptibly brief glance of sharpest scrutiny. It was like the wink of a camera shutter, but laughed in the same instant. "Which way do you mean that?" "You have been quick," returned the visitor, repaying that glance with equal swiftness, "to seize upon the American idiom. I mean, how small a contribution would you be willing to receive toward your support?" Corliss did not glance again at Ray. Instead, he looked interested in the smoke of his cigar. "Contribution," he repeated, with no inflection whatever, "toward my support." "I mean, of course, how small an investment in your oil company." "Oh, anything," returned the promoter, with quick amiability. "We need to sell all the stock we can." "All the money you can get?" "Precisely. It's really a colossal proposition, Mr. Vilas." Corliss spoke with brisk enthusiasm. "It's a perfectly certain enormous profit upon everything that goes in. Prince Moliterno cables me, later investigations show that the oil field is more than twice as large as we thought when I left Naples. He's on the ground now, buying up what he can, secretly." "I had an impression from Richard Lindley that the secret had been discovered." "Oh, yes, but only by a few; and those are trying to keep it quiet from the others, of course." "I see. Does your partner know of your success in raising a large investment?" "You mean Lindley's? Certainly." Corliss waved his hand in light deprecation. "Of course that's something, but Moliterno would hardly be apt to think of it as very large. You see, he's putting in about 5 times that much himself, and I've already turned over to him double it for myself. Still, it counts, certainly, and of course it will be a great thing for Lindley." "I fear," Ray said hesitatingly, "you won't be much interested in my drop for your bucket. I have $1,200 in the world, and it is in the bank. I stopped there on my way here. To be exact, I have $1,247.51. My dear sir, will you allow me to purchase $1,000 worth of stock? I will keep the $247.51 to live on. I may need an egg while waiting for you to make me rich. Will you accept so small an investment?" "Certainly," said Corliss, laughing. "Why not? You may as well profit by the chance as anyone. I'll send you the stock certificates. we put them at par. I'm attending to that myself, as our secretary, Mr. Madison, is unable to take up his duties." Vilas took a check-book and a fountain pen from his pocket. "Oh, any time, any time," said Corliss cheerfully, observing the new investor's movement. "Now, I think," returned Vilas quietly. "How shall I make it out?" "Oh, to me, I suppose," answered Corliss indifferently. "That will save a little trouble, and I can turn it over to Moliterno, by cable, as I did Lindley's. I'll give you a receipt." "You need not mind that," said Ray. "Really, it is of no importance." "Of course the check itself is a receipt," remarked Corliss, tossing it carelessly upon a desk. "You'll have some handsome returns for that slip of paper, Mr. Vilas." "In that blithe hope I came," said Ray airily. "I am confident of it. I have my own ways of divination, Mr. Corliss. I have gleams." He rose as if to go, but stood looking thoughtfully about the apartment again. "Singular impression," he murmured. "Not exactly as if I'd seen it in a dream. And yet. "You have symptoms of clairvoyance at times, I take it." The conscious, smooth superiority of the dexterous man playing with an inconsequent opponent resounded in this speech clear as the humming of a struck bell. And Vilas shot him a single open glance of fire from hectic eyes. For that instant the frailer buck trumpeted challenge. Corliss, broad-shouldered, supple of waist, graceful and strong, smiled down negligently. Yet the very air between the two men seemed charged with an invisible explosive. Ray laughed quickly, as in undisturbed good nature; then, flourishing his stick, turned toward the door. "Oh, no, it isn't clairvoyance, no more than when I told you that your only real interest is women." He paused, his hand upon the doorknob. "I'm a quaint mixture, however. Perhaps I should be handled with care." "Very good of you," laughed Corliss, "this warning. The afternoon I had the pleasure of meeting you, I think I remember your implying that you were a mere marionette." "A haggard harlequin," snapped Vilas, waving his hand to a mirror across the room. "Don't I look it?" And the phrase fitted him with tragic accuracy. "You see, what a merry wedding guest I'll be. I invite you to join me on the nuptial eve." "Thanks. Who's getting married? When the nuptial eve?" Ray opened the door and, turning, rolled his eyes fantastically. "Haven't you heard?" he cried. "When Hecate marries John Barleycorn." He bowed low. "Mr. Midas, adieu." Corliss stood in the doorway and watched him walk down the long hall to the elevator. There, Ray turned and waved his hand, the other responding with gaiety which was not assumed. Vilas might be insane, or drunk, or both, but the signature upon his check was unassailable. Corliss closed the door and began to pace his apartment thoughtfully. His expression manifested a peculiar phenomenon. In company, or upon the street, or when he talked with men, the open look and frank eyes of this stalwart young man were disarming and his most winning assets. But now, as he paced alone in his apartment, now that he was not upon exhibition, now, when there was no eye to behold him, and there was no reason to dissimulate or veil a single thought or feeling, his look was anything but open. The last trace of frankness disappeared. The muscles at mouth and eyes shifted. Lines and planes intermingled and altered subtly. There was a moment of misty transformation, and the face of another man emerged. It was the face of a man uninstructed in mercy. It was a shrewd and planning face, alert, resourceful, elaborately perceptive, and flawlessly hard. But, beyond all, it was the face of a man perpetually on guard. He had the air of debating a question, his hands in his pockets, his handsome forehead lined with a temporary indecision. His sentry go extended the length of his 2 rooms, and each time he came back into his bedroom his glance fell consideringly upon a steamer trunk of the largest size, at the foot of his bed. The trunk was partially packed as if for departure. And, indeed, it was the question of departure which he was debating. He was a man of varied dexterities, and he had one faculty of high value which had often saved him, had never betrayed him. It was intuitive and equal to a sixth sense. He always knew when it was time to go. An inner voice warned him. He trusted to it and obeyed it. And it had spoken now, and there was his trunk half packed in answer. But he had stopped midway in his packing, because he had never yet failed to make a clean sweep where there was the slightest chance for one. He hated to leave a big job before it was completely finished, and Mr. Wade Trumble had refused to invest in the oil fields of Basilicata. Corliss paused beside the trunk, stood a moment immersed in thought, then nodded once, decisively, and, turning to a dressing table, began to place some silver-mounted brushes and bottles in a leather traveling case. There was a knock at the outer door. He frowned, set down what he had in his hands, went to the door and opened it to find Mr. Pryor, that plain citizen, awaiting entrance. Corliss remained motionless in an arrested attitude, his hand upon the knob of the opened door. His position did not alter. He became almost unnaturally still, a rigidity which seemed to increase. Then he looked quickly behind him, over his shoulder, and back again, with a swift movement of the head. "No," said Pryor, at that, "I don't want you. I just thought I'd have 2 minutes' talk with you. All right?" "All right," said Corliss quietly. "Come in." He turned carelessly, and walked away from the door, keeping between his guest and the desk. When he reached the desk, he turned again, and leaned against it, his back to it, but in the action of turning his hand had swept a sheet of note paper over Ray Vilas's check, a too conspicuous oblong of pale blue. Pryor had come in and closed the door. "I don't know," he began, regarding the other through his glasses with steady eyes, "that I'm going to interfere with you at all, Corliss. I just happened to strike you. I wasn't looking for you. I'm on vacation, visiting my married daughter that lives here, and I don't want to mix in if I can help it." Corliss laughed easily. "There's nothing for you to mix in. You couldn't if you wanted to." "Well, I hope that's true," said Pryor, with an air of indulgence, curiously like that of a teacher for a pupil who promises improvement. "I do indeed. There isn't anybody I'd like to see turn straight more than you. You're educated and cultured and refined, and smarter than all hell. It would be a big thing. That's one reason I'm taking the trouble to talk to you." "I told you I wasn't doing anything," said Corliss, with a petulance as oddly like that of a pupil as the other's indulgence was like that of a tutor. "This is my own town. I own property here, and I came here to sell it. I can prove it in half a minute's telephoning. Where do you come in?" "Easy, easy," said Pryor soothingly. "I've just told you I don't want to come in at all." "Then what do you want?" "I came to tell you just one thing: to go easy up there at Mr. Madison's house." Corliss laughed contemptuously. "It's my house. I own it. That's the property I came here to sell." "Oh, I know," responded Pryor. "That part of it's all right. But I've seen you several times with that young lady, and you looked pretty thick to me. You know you haven't got any business doing such things, Corliss. I know your record from Budapest to Copenhagen, and—" "See here, my friend," said the younger man angrily, "you may be a tip-top spotter for the government when it comes to running down some poor old lady that's bought a string of pearls in the Rue de la Paix." "I've been in the service 28 years," remarked Pryor mildly. "All right," said the other with a gesture of impatience, "and you got me once. All right. Well, that's over, isn't it? Have I tried anything since?" "Not in that line," said Pryor. "Well, what business have you with any other line?" demanded Corliss angrily. "Who made you general supervisor of public morals? I want to know." "Now, what's the use of your getting excited? I'm just here to tell you that I'm going to keep an eye on you. I don't know many people here, and I haven't taken any particular pains to look you up. For all I know, you're only here to sell your house, as you say. But I know old Madison a little, and I kind of took a fancy to him. He's a mighty nice old man, and he's got a nice family. He's sick, and it wouldn't do to trouble him. But honest, Corliss, if you don't slack off in that neighborhood a little, I'll have to have a talk with the young lady herself." A derisory light showed faintly in the young man's eyes as he inquired softly: "That all, Mr. Pryor?" "No. Don't try anything on out here. Not in any of your lines." "I don't mean to." "That's right. Sell your house and clear out. You'll find it healthy." He went to the door. "So far as I can see," he observed ruminatively, "you haven't brought any of that Moliterno crowd you used to work with over to this side with you." "I haven't seen Moliterno for 2 years," said Corliss sharply. "Well, I've said my say." Pryor gave him a last word as he went out. "You keep away from that little girl." "Ass!" exclaimed Corliss as the door closed. He exhaled a deep breath sharply, and broke into a laugh. Then he went quickly into his bedroom and began to throw the things out of his trunk. Chapter 14 of the Flirt, by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Hedrick Madison's eyes were not of marble. His heart was not flint nor his skin steel plate. He was flesh and tender. He was a vulnerable, breathing boy, with highly developed capacities for pain which were now being taxed to their utmost. Once he had loved to run, to leap, to disport himself in the sun, to drink deep of the free air. He had loved life and one or two of his fellow men. He had borne himself buoyantly, with jaunty self-confidence, even with some intolerance toward the weaknesses of others, not infrequently displaying merriment over their mischances. But his time had found him at last. The evil day had come. Indian summer was Indian for him, indeed. Sweet death were welcome. No charity was left in him. He leaped no more, but walked broodingly and sought the dark places. And yet it could not be said that times were dull for him. The luckless picket who finds himself in an open 80-acre field, under the eye of a sharpshooter up a tree, would not be apt to describe the experience as dull. And Cora never missed a shot. She loved the work. Her pleasure in it was almost as agonizing for the target as was the accuracy of her fire. She was ingenious. The horrible facts at her disposal were damaging enough in all conscience, but they did not content her. She invented a love story, assuming that Hedrick was living it. He was supposed to be pining for Lolita, to be fading, day by day, because of enforced separation. And she contrived this to such an effect of reality, and with a diabolical affectation of delicacy in referring to it, that the mere remark, with gentle sympathy, "I think poor Hedrick is looking a little better to day," infallibly produced something closely resembling a spasm. She formed the habit of never mentioning her brother in his presence except as "poor Hedrick," a too obvious commiseration of his pretended attachment, which met with like success. Most dreadful of all, she invented romantic phrases and expressions assumed to have been spoken or written by Hedrick in reference to his unhappiness, and she repeated them so persistently, yet always with such apparent sincerity of belief, that they were quotations from him, and not her inventions, that the driven youth knew a fear, sometimes, that the horrid things were actually of his own perpetration. The most withering of these was, "Torn from her I love, by the ruthless hand of a parent." It was not completed. Cora never got any further with it, nor was there need. A howl of fury invariably assured her of an effect as satisfactory as could possibly have been obtained by an effort less impressionistic. Life became a series of easy victories for Cora, and she made them somehow the more deadly for Hedrick by not seeming to look at him in his affliction, nor even to be aiming his way. He never could tell when the next shot was coming. At the table, the ladies of his family might be deep in dress or discussing Mr. Madison's slowly improving condition, when Cora, with utter irrelevance, would sigh, and looking sadly into her coffee, murmur, "Ah, fond memories," or "Why am I haunted by the dead past?" or the dreadful, "Torn from her I love by the ruthless hand of a parent." There was compassion in Laura's eyes, and in his mother's, but Cora was irresistible, and they always ended by laughing in spite of themselves, and though they pleaded for Hedrick in private, their remonstrances proved strikingly ineffective. Hedrick was the only person who had ever used the high hand with Cora. She found repayment too congenial. In the daytime he could not go in the front yard, but Cora's window would open, and a tenderly smiling Cora lean out to call affectionately, "Don't walk on the grass, darling little boy." Or she would nod happily to him and begin to sing, "Oh, come, beloved, love, let me press thee, while I caress thee in one long kiss, Lolita." One terror still hung over him. If it fell, as it might at any fatal moment, then the utmost were indeed done upon him, and this apprehension bathed his soul in night. In his own circle of congenial age and sex, he was, by virtue of superior bitterness and precocity of speech, a chief, a moral castigator, a satirist of manners, a creator of stinging nicknames, and many nourished unhealed grievances which they had little hope of satisfying against him, those who attempted it invariably departing with more to avenge than they had brought with them. Let these once know what Cora knew. The vision was unthinkable. It was Cora's patent desire to release the hideous item, to spread the scandal broadcast among his fellows, to ring it from the school bells, to send it winging on the hot wings of Hades. The boys had always liked his yard and the empty stable to play in, and the devices he now employed to divert their activities elsewhere were worthy of a great strategist. His energy and an abnormal ingenuity accomplished incredible things. School had been in session several weeks, and only one boy had come within conversational distance of Cora. Him Hedrick bore away bodily, in simulation of resistless high spirits, a brilliant exhibition of stagecraft. And then Cora's friend, Mrs. Villard, removed her son Egerton from the private school he had hitherto attended, and he made his appearance in Hedrick's class, one morning at the public school. Hedrick's eye lighted with a savage gleam. Timidly the first joy he had known for 1,000 years crept into his grim heart. After school, Egerton expiated a part of Cora's cruelty. It was a very small part, and the exploit no more than infinitesimally soothing to the conqueror, but when Egerton finally got home he was no sight for a mother. Thus Hedrick wrought his own doom. Mrs. Villard telephoned to Cora, and Cora went immediately to see her. It happened to Hedrick that he was late leaving home the next morning. His entrance into his classroom was an undeniable sensation, and within 10 minutes the teacher had lost all control of the school. It became necessary to send for the principal. Recess was a frantic nightmare for Hedrick, and his homeward progress at noon a procession of such uproarious screamers as were his equals in speed. The nethermost depths were reached when an ignoble pig-tailed person he had always trodden upon flat-footed screamed across the fence from next door as he reached fancied sanctuary in his own backyard. "Kiss me some more, darling little boy." This worm, established upon the fence opposite the conservatory windows, and in direct view from the table in the dining room, shrieked the accursed request at short intervals throughout the luncheon hour. The humor of childhood is sometimes almost intrusive. And now began a life for Hedrick which may be rather painfully but truthfully likened to a prolongation of the experiences of a rat that finds itself in the middle of a crowded street in daylight. There is plenty of excitement, but no pleasure. He was pursued, harried, hounded from early morning till nightfall, and even in his bed would hear shrill shouts go down the sidewalk from the throats of juvenile fly-by-nights. "Oh, darling little boy, kiss me some more." And one day he overheard a remark which strengthened his own conviction that the cataclysm had affected the whole United States. It was a teacher who spoke, explaining to another a disturbance in the hall of the school. She said behind her hand, "He kissed an idiot." Laura had not even remotely foreseen the consequences of her revelation, nor, indeed, did she now properly estimate their effect upon Hedrick. She and her mother were both sorry for him, and did what they could to alleviate his misfortunes, but there was an inevitable remnant of amusement in their sympathy. Youth, at war, affects stoicism, but not resignation. In truth, resignation was not much in Hedrick's line, and it would be far from the fact to say that he was softened by his sufferings. He brooded profoundly, and his brightest thought was revenge. It was not upon Cora that his chief bitterness turned. Cora had always been the constant, open enemy. Warfare between them was a regular condition of life, and unconsciously, and without thinking it out, he recognized the naturalness of her seizing upon the deadliest weapon against him that came to her hand. There was nothing unexpected in that. No, the treachery, to his mind, lay in the act of Laura, that non-combatant, who had furnished the natural and habitual enemy with this scourge. At all times, and with or without cause, he ever stood ready to do anything possible for the reduction of Cora's cockiness, but now it was for the taking down of Laura and the repayment of her uncalled for and overwhelming assistance to the opposite camp that he lay awake nights and kept his imagination hot. Laura was a serene person, so neutral, outwardly at least, and so little concerned for herself in any matter he could bring to mind, that for purposes of revenge she was a difficult proposition. And then, in a desperate hour, he remembered her book. Only once had he glimpsed it, but she had shown unmistakable agitation of a mysterious sort as she wrote in it, and, upon observing his presence, a prompt determination to prevent his reading a word of what she had written. Therefore, it was something peculiarly sacred and intimate. This deduction was proved by the care she exercised in keeping the book concealed from all eyes. A slow satisfaction began to permeate him. He made up his mind to find that padlocked ledger. He determined with devoted ardor that when he found it he would make the worst possible use of it, the worst, that is, for Laura. As for consequences to himself, he was beyond them. There is an Irish play in which an old woman finds that she no longer fears the sea when it has drowned the last of her sons. It can do nothing more to her. Hedrick no longer feared anything. The book was somewhere in Laura's room. He knew that. And there were enough opportunities to search, though Laura had a way of coming in unexpectedly, which was embarrassing. And he suffered from a sense of inadequacy when, on the occasion of his first new attempt, he answered the casual inquiry as to his presence by saying that he "had a headache." He felt that there was something indirect in the reply, but Laura was unsuspicious and showed no disposition to be analytical. After this, he took the precaution to bring a school book with him, and she often found the boy seated quietly by her west window, immersed in study. He said he thought his headaches came from his eyes, and that the west light sort of eased them a little. The ledger remained undiscovered, although probably there has never been a room more thoroughly and painstakingly searched, without its floor being taken up and its walls torn down. The most mysterious, and at the same time, the most maddening thing about it, was the apparent simplicity of the task. He was certain that the room contained the book. Listening, barefooted, outside the door at night, he had heard the pen scratching. The room was as plain as a room can be, and small. There was a scantily filled clothes press. He had explored every cubic inch of it. There was the small writing table with one drawer. It held only some note paper and a box of pen points. There was a bureau. To his certain knowledge it contained no secret whatever. There were a few giltless chairs, and a white wash stand. a mere basin and slab with exposed plumbing. Lastly there was the bed, a very large and ugly Eastlake contrivance. He had acquired a close acquaintance with all of it except the interior of the huge mattress itself, and here, he finally concluded, must of necessity be the solution. The surface of the mattress he knew to be unbroken; nevertheless the book was there. He had recently stimulated his deductive powers with a narrative of French journalistic sagacity in a similar case, and he applied French reasoning. The ledger existed. It was somewhere in the room. He had searched everything except the interior of the mattress. The ledger was in that interior. The exploration thus become necessary presented some difficulties. Detection in the act would involve explanations hard to invent. It would not do to say he was looking for his knife, and he could not think of any excuse altogether free from a flavor of insincerity. A lameness beset them all and made them liable to suspicion; and Laura, once suspicious, might be petty enough to destroy the book, and so put it out of his power forever. He must await the right opportunity, and, after a racking exercise of patience, at last he saw it coming. Dr. Sloane had permitted his patient to come downstairs for an increasing interval each day. Mr. Madison crept, rather than walked, leaning upon his wife and closely attended by Miss Peirce. He spoke with difficulty and not clearly; still there was a perceptible improvement, and his family were falling into the habit of speaking of him as almost well. On that account Mrs. Madison urged her daughters to accept an invitation from the mother of the once courtly Egerton Villard. It was at breakfast that the matter was discussed. "Of course Cora must go," Laura began, "but—" "But nothing!" interrupted Cora. "How would it look if I went and you didn't? Everybody knows papa's almost well, and they'd think it silly for us to give up the first real dance since last spring on that account. Yet they're just spiteful enough if I went and you stayed home to call me a 'girl of no heart.' Besides," she added sweetly, "we ought to go to show Mrs. Villard we aren't hurt because Egerton takes so little notice of poor Hedrick." Hedrick's lips moved silently, as in prayer. "I'd rather not," said Laura. "I doubt if I'd have a very good time." "You would, too," returned her sister decidedly. "The men like to dance with you. You dance every bit as well as I do, and that black lace is the most becoming dress you ever had. Nobody ever remembers a black dress, anyway, unless it's cut very conspicuously, and yours isn't. I can't go without you. They love to say nasty things about me, and you're too good a sister to give 'em this chance, you old dear." She laughed and nodded affectionately across the table at Laura. "You've got to go." "Yes, it would be nicer," said the mother. And so it was settled. It was simultaneously settled in Hedrick's mind that the night of the dance should mark his discovery of the ledger. He would have some industrious hours alone with the mysterious mattress, safe from intrusion. Meekly he lifted his eyes from his plate. "I'm glad you're going, Sister Laura," he said in a gentle voice. "I think a change will do you good." "Isn't it wonderful?" exclaimed Cora, appealing to the others to observe him. "What an improvement a disappointment in love can make in deportment?" For once Hedrick only smiled. Chapter 15 of The Flirt by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Laura had spent some thoughtful hours upon her black lace dress, with results that astonished her family. It became a ball gown, and a splendidly effective one. She arranged her dark hair in a more elaborate fashion than ever before, in a close coronal of faintly lustrous braids. She had no jewelry and obviously needed none. Her last action, but one before she left her room, was to dispose of the slender chain and key she always wore round her neck. Then her final glance at the mirror, which fairly revealed a lovely woman, ended in a deprecatory little face she made at herself, It meant, "Yes, old lady, you fancy yourself very passable in here all by yourself, don't you? Just wait. You'll be standing beside Cora in a moment." And when she did stand beside Cora, in the latter's room, a moment later, her thought seemed warranted. Cora, radiant eyed, in high bloom, and exquisite from head to foot in a shimmering white dancing dress, a glittering crescent fastened to the silver fillet that bound her vivid hair, was a flame of enchantment. Mrs. Madison, almost weeping with delight, led her daughters proudly, an arm round the waist of each, into her husband's room. Propped with pillows, he reclined in an armchair while Miss Peirce prepared his bed, an occupation she gave over upon this dazzling entrance, departing tactfully. "Look at these!" cried the mother. "From our garden, Jim, dear. Don't we feel rich, you and I?" And Laura," said the sick man, with the slow and imperfect enunciation caused by his disease. "Laura looks pretty, too." "Isn't she adorable!" Cora exclaimed warmly. "She decided to be the portrait of a young duchess, you see, all stately splendor, made of snow and midnight." "Hear, hear!" laughed Laura, but she blushed with pleasure, and, taking Cora's hand in hers, lifted it to her lips. "And do you see Cora's crescent?" demanded Mrs. Madison. "What do you think of that for magnificence? She went downtown this morning with $7, and came back with that and her party gloves and $1 in change. Isn't she a bargainer? Even for rhinestones they are the cheapest things you ever heard of. They look precisely like stones of the very finest water." They did, so precisely, indeed, that if the resemblance did not amount to actual identity, then had a jeweler of the town been able to deceive the eye of Valentine Corliss, which was an eye singularly learned in such matters. "They're both smart girls," said Madison. "Both of them. And they look beautiful to night, both. Laura is amazing." When they had gone, Mrs. Madison returned from the stairway, and, kneeling beside her husband, put her arms round him gently. She had seen the tear that was marking its irregular pathway down his flaccid, gray cheek, and she understood. Don't worry, Jim," she whispered. "Those bright, beautiful things, aren't they treasures?" It's Laura," he said. "Cora will be all right. She looks out for herself. I'm afraid for Laura. Aren't you?" "No, no," she protested. "I'm not afraid for either of them." But she was. The mother had always been afraid for Cora. At the dance, the two girls, attended up the stairway to the ballroom by a chattering covey of black coats, made a sensational entrance to a gallant fanfare of music, an effect which may have been timed to the premonitory tuning of instruments heard during the ascent. At all events, it was a great success, and Cora, standing revealed under the wide gilt archway, might have been a lithe and shining figure from the year 1801, about to dance at the Luxembourg. She placed her hand upon the sleeve of Richard Lindley, and, glancing intelligently over his shoulder into the eyes of Valentine Corliss, glided rhythmically away. People looked at her. They always did. Not only the non-dancers watched her. Eyes everywhere were upon her, even though the owners gyrated, glided, and dipped on distant orbits. The other girls watched her, as a rule, with a profound and almost passionate curiosity, and they were prompt to speak well of her to men, except in trustworthy intimacy, because they did not enjoy being wrongfully thought jealous. Many of them kept somewhat aloof from her, but none of them ever, nowadays, showed superiority in her presence, or snubbed her. That had been tried and proved disastrous in rebound. Cora never failed to pay her score, and with a terrifying interest added, her native tendency being to take 2 eyes for an eye and the whole jaw for a tooth. They let her alone, though they asked and asked among themselves the never monotonous question, Why do men fall in love with girls like that? A riddle which, solved, makes wives condescending to their husbands. Most of the people at this dance had known one another as friends, or antagonists, or indifferent acquaintances, for years, and in such an assembly there are always two worlds, that of the women and that of the men. Each has its own vision, radically different from that of the other. But the greatest difference is that the men are unaware of the other world, only a few of them, usually queer ones like Ray Vilas, vaguely perceiving that there are two visions, while all the women understand both perfectly. The men splash about on the surface, the women keep their eyes open under water. Or the life of the assembly is like a bright tapestry. The men take it as a picture and are not troubled to know how it is produced, but women are weavers. There was a beauty of far-flung renown at Mrs. Villard's tonight, Mary Kane, a creature so made and colored that young men at sight of her became as water, and older men were apt to wonder regretfully why all women could not have been made like Mary. She was a kindly soul, and never intentionally outshone her sisters. But the perfect sumptuousness of her had sometimes tried the amiability of Cora Madison, to whom such success without effort and without spark seemed unfair, as well as bovine. Miss Kane was a central figure at the dance, shining tranquilly in a new triumph. That day her engagement had been announced to Mr. George Watling, a young man of no special attainments, but desirable in his possessions and suitable to his happiness. The pair radiated the pardonable, gay importance of newly engaged people, and Cora, who had never before bestowed any notice upon Mr. Watling, now examined him with thoughtful attention. Finding him at her elbow in a group about a punch bowl, between dances, she offered warm felicitations. "But I don't suppose you care whether I care for you to be happy or not," she added, with a little plaintive laugh. "You always hated me so." Mr. Watling was startled. Never before had he imagined that Cora Madison had given him a thought. But there was not only thought, there was feeling, in this speech. She seemed to be concealing with bravery an even deeper feeling than the one inadvertently expressed. "Why, what on earth makes you think that?" he exclaimed. "Think it? I know it." She gave him a strange look, luminous yet mysterious, a curtain withdrawn only to show a shining mist with something undefined but dazzling beyond. "I've always known it." And she turned away from him abruptly. He sprang after her. "But you're wrong. I never—" "Oh, yes, you have." They began to discuss it, and for better consideration of the theme it became necessary for Cora to "cut" the next dance, promised to another, and to give it to Mr. Watling. They danced several times together, and Mr. Watling's expression was serious. The weavers of the tapestry smiled and whispered things the men would not have understood, nor believed. Ray Vilas, seated alone in a recessed and softly lighted gallery, did not once lose sight of the flitting sorceress. With his elbows on the railing, he leaned out, his head swaying slowly and mechanically as she swept up and down the tumultuously moving room, his passionate eyes gaunt and brilliant with his hunger. And something very like a general thrill passed over the assembly when, a little later, it was seen that he was dancing with her. Laura, catching a glimpse of this couple, started and looked profoundly disturbed. The extravagance of Vilas's passion, and the depths he sounded, in his absurd despair when discarded, had been matters of almost public gossip. He was accounted a somewhat scandalous and unbalanced but picturesque figure. And for the lady, whose light hand had wrought such havoc upon him, to be seen dancing with him was sufficiently startling to elicit the universal remark, evidently considered superlative, that it was "just like Cora Madison." Cora usually perceived, with an admirably clear head, all that went on about her, and she was conscious of increasing the sensation, when, after a few turns round the room, she allowed her partner to conduct her to a secluding grove of palms in the gallery. She sank into the chair he offered, and, fixing her eyes upon a small lamp of colored glass which hung overhead, ostentatiously looked bored. "At your feet, Cora," he said, seating himself upon a stool, and leaning toward her. "Isn't it appropriate that we should talk to music, we two? It shouldn't be that quick step, though, not dance music, should it?" "Don't know, I'm sure," murmured Cora. "You were kind to dance with me," he said huskily. "I dared to speak to you." She did not change her attitude nor the direction of her glance. "I couldn't cut you very well with the whole town looking on. I'm tired of being talked about. Besides, I don't care much who I dance with, so he doesn't step on me." "Cora," he said, "it is the prelude to La Lysienne that they should play for you and me. Yes, I think it should be that." "Never heard of it." "It's just a rustic tragedy. The story of a boy in the south of France who lets love become his whole life, and then it kills him." "Sounds very stupid," she commented languidly. "People do sometimes die of love, even nowadays," he said tremulously, "in the South." She let her eyes drift indifferently to him, and perceived that he was trembling from head to foot, that his hands and knees shook piteously, that his lips quivered and twitched; and, at sight of this agitation, an expression of strong distaste came to her face. "I see." Her eyes returned to the lamp. "You're from the South, and of course it's going to kill you." "You didn't speak the exact words you had in your mind." "Oh, what words did I have in my mind?" she asked impatiently. "What you really meant was, if it does kill you, what of it?" She laughed, and sighed as for release. "Cora," he said huskily, "I understand you a little because you possess me. I've never, literally never, had another thought since the first time I saw you. Nothing but you. I think of you, actually, every moment. Drunk or sober, asleep or awake. It's nothing but you, you, you. It will never be different. I don't know why I can't get over it. I only know I can't. You own me. You burn like a hot coal in my heart. You're through with me, I know. You drained me dry. You're like a child who eats so heartily of what he likes that he never touches it again, and I'm a dish you're sick of. Oh, it's all plain enough, I can tell you. I'm not exciting any more. No, just a nauseous slave." "Do you want people to hear you?" she inquired angrily, for his voice had risen. He tempered his tone. "Cora, when you liked me you went a pretty clipping gait with me," he said, trembling even more than before. "But you're infinitely more infatuated with this Toreador of a Corliss than you were with me. You're lost in him. You're slaving for him as I would for you. How far are you going with—" "Do you want me to walk away and leave you?" she asked, suddenly sitting up straight and looking at him with dilating eyes. "If you want a scene—" "It's over," he said, more calmly. "I know now how dangerous the man is. Of course you will tell him I said that." He laughed quietly. "Well, between a dangerous chap and a desperate one, we may look for some lively times. Do you know, I believe I think about as continuously of him, lately, as I do of you. That's why I put almost my last cent into his oil company, and got what may be almost my last dance with you." "I wouldn't call it almost your last dance with me," she returned icily. "Not after what you've said. I had a foolish idea you could behave well, at least decently." "Did Corliss tell you that I insulted him in his rooms at the hotel?" "You!" she laughed genuinely. "I see him letting you." "He did, however. By manner and in speech I purposely and deliberately insulted him. You'll tell him every word of this, of course, and he'll laugh at it, but I give myself the pleasure of telling you. I put the proposition of an investment to him in a way nobody not a crook would have allowed to be smoothed over, and he allowed it to be smoothed over. He ate it. I felt he was a swindler when he was showing Richard Lindley his maps and papers, and now I've proved it to myself, and it's worth the price." Often when they had danced, and often during this interview, his eyes lifted curiously to the white flaming crescent in her hair. Now they fixed themselves upon it, and in a flash of divination he cried, "You wear it for me." She did not understand. "Finished raving?" she inquired. "I gave Corliss $1,000," he said slowly. "Considering the fact that it was my last, I flatter myself it was not unhandsomely done, though I may never need it. It has struck me that the sum was about what a man who had just cleaned up 50,000 might regard as a sort of extra for lagniappe, and that he might have thought it an appropriate amount to invest in a present, some jewels perhaps, to place in the hair of a pretty friend." She sprang to her feet, furious, but he stood in front of her and was able to bar the way for a moment. "Cora, I'll have a last word with you, if I have to hold you," he said with great rapidity in a voice which shook with the intense repression he was putting upon himself. "We do one thing in the South, where I came from. We protect our women." "This looks like it. Keeping me when—" "I love you," he said, his face whiter than she had ever seen it. "I love you. I'm your dog. You take care of yourself if you want to take care of anybody else, as sure as—" "My dance, Miss Madison." A young gentleman on vacation from the Navy had approached, and, with perfect unconsciousness of what he was interrupting, but with well-founded certainty that he was welcome to the lady, urged his claim in a confident voice. "I thought it would never come, you know, but it's here at last, and so am I." He laughed propitiatingly. Ray yielded now at once. She moved him aside with her gloved forearm as if he were merely an awkward stranger who unwittingly stood between her and the claiming partner. Carrying the gesture farther, she took the latter's arm, and smilingly, and without a backward glance, passed onward and left the gallery. The lieutenant, who had met her once or twice before, was her partner for the succeeding dance as well, and, having noted the advantages of the place where he had discovered her, persuaded her to return there to sit through the second. Then, without any fatiguing preamble, he proposed marriage. Cora did not accept, but effected a compromise which, for the present, was to consist of an exchange of photographs his to be in uniform and letters. She was having an evening to her heart. Ray's attack on Corliss had no dimming effect, her thought of it being that she was used to his raving. It meant nothing. And since Ray had prophesied she would tell Corliss about it, she decided not to do so. The naval young gentleman and Valentine Corliss were the greatest of all the lions among the ladies that night. She had easily annexed the lieutenant, and Corliss was hers already, though for a purpose she had not yet been seen in company with him. He was visibly "making an impression." His name, as he had said to Richard Lindley, was held in honor in the town, and there was a flavor of fancied romance in his absence since boyhood in unknown parts, and his return now with a foreign air and a bow that almost took the breath of some of the younger recipients. He was, too, in his way, the handsomest man in the room, and the smiling, open frankness of his look, the ready cordiality of his manner, were found very winning. He caused plenty of flutter. Cora waited till the evening was half over before she gave him any visible attention. Then, during a silence of the music, between two dances, she made him a negligent sign with her hand, the gesture of one indifferently beckoning a creature who is certain to come, and went on talking casually to the man who was with her. Corliss was the length of the room from her, chatting gaily with a large group of girls and women, but he immediately nodded to her, made his bow to individuals of the group, and crossed the vacant, glistening floor to her. Cora gave him no greeting whatever. She dismissed her former partner and carelessly turned away with Corliss to some chairs in a corner. "Do you see that?" asked Vilas, leaning over the balcony railing with Richard Lindley. "Look! She's showing the other girls, don't you see? He's the new man. She let him hope she wasn't going in for him. A lot of them probably didn't even know that she knew him. She sent him out on parade till they're all excited about him. Now she shows him he's entirely her property, and does it so matter-of-factly that it's rubbed in twice as hard as if she seemed to take some pains about it. He doesn't dance. She'll sit out with him now, till they all read the tag she's put on him. She says she hates being talked about. She lives on it, so long as it's envious. And did you see her with that chap from the Navy? Neptune thinks he's dallying with Venus, perhaps, but he'll get—" Lindley looked at him commiseratingly. "I think I never saw prettier decorations. Have you noticed, Ray? Must have used 1,000 chrysanthemums." "Toreador," whispered the other between his teeth, looking at Corliss. Then, turning to his companion, he asked, "Has it occurred to you to get any information about Basilicata, or about the ancestral domain of Moliterni, from our consul general at Naples?" Richard hesitated. "Well, yes, I did think of that. Yes, I thought of it." "But you didn't do it." "No. That is, I haven't yet. You see, Corliss explained to me that—" His friend interrupted him with a sour laugh. "Oh, certainly. He's one of the greatest explainers ever welcomed to our city." Richard said mildly, "And then, Ray, once I've gone into a thing, I don't like to seem suspicious." "Poor old Dick," returned Vilas compassionately. "You kind, easy, sincere men are so conscientiously untruthful with yourselves. You know in your heart that Cora would be furious with you if you seemed suspicious, and she's been so nice to you since you put in your savings to please her, that you can't bear to risk offending her. She's twisted you around her little finger, and the unnamed fear that haunts you is that you won't be allowed to stay there, even twisted." "Pretty decorations, Ray," said Richard, but he grew very red. "Do you know what you'll do?" asked Ray, regarding him keenly, "if this Don Giovanni from sunny Italy is shown up as a plain get-rich-quick swindler?" "I haven't considered—" "You would do precisely," said Ray, "nothing. Cora'd see to that. You'd sigh and go to work again, beginning at the beginning, where you were years ago, and doing it all over. Admirable resignation, but not for me. I'm a stockholder in his company, and in shape to take steps. I don't know if I'd be patient enough to make them legal. Perhaps I should. He may be safe on the legal side. I'll know more about that when I find out if there is a Prince Moliterno in Naples who owns land in Basilicata." "You don't doubt it?" "I doubt everything. In this particular matter I'll have less to doubt when I get an answer from the consul general. I've written, you see." Lindley looked disturbed. "You have?" Vilas read him at a glance. "You're afraid to find out!" he cried. Then he set his hand on the other's shoulder. "If there ever was a God's fool, it's you, Dick Lindley. Really, I wonder the world hasn't kicked you around more than it has. You'll never kick back. You're as easy as an old shoe. Cora makes you unhappy." He went on, and with the very mention of her name, his voice shook with passion. "But on my soul I don't believe you know what jealousy means. You don't even understand hate. You don't eat your heart—" "Let's go and eat something better," suggested Richard, laughing. "There's a continuous supper downstairs, and I hear it's very good." Ray smiled, rescued for a second from himself. "There isn't anything better than your heart, you old window pane, and I'm glad you don't eat it. And if I ever mix it up with Don Giovanni T. Corliss, T stands for Toreador, I do believe it'll be partly on your—" He paused, leaving the sentence unfinished, as his attention was caught by the abysmal attitude of a figure in another part of the gallery, Mr. Wade Trumble, alone in a corner, sitting upon the small of his small back, munching at an unlighted cigar and otherwise manifesting a biting gloom. Ray drew Lindley's attention to this tableau of pain. "Here's a three of us," he said. He turned to look down into the rhythmic kaleidoscope of dancers. "And there goes the girl we all ought to be morbid about." "Who is that?" "Laura Madison. Why aren't we? What a self-respecting creature she is, with that cool, sweet steadiness of hers. She's like a mountain lake. She's lovely and she plays like an angel. But so far as anybody's ever thinking about her is concerned, she might almost as well not exist. Yet she's really beautiful tonight, if you can imagine to think of her except as a sort of retinue for Cora." "She is rather beautiful tonight. Laura's always a very nice-looking girl," said Richard, and with the advent of an idea, he added, "I think one reason she isn't more conspicuous and thought about is that she is so quiet." And, upon his companion's greeting this inspiration with a burst of laughter, "Yes, that was a brilliant deduction," he said, "but I do think she's about the quietest person I ever knew. I've noticed there are times when she'll scarcely speak at all for half an hour, or even more." "You're not precisely noisy yourself," said Ray. "Have you danced with her this evening?" "Why, no," returned the other, in a tone which showed this omission to be a discovery. "Not yet. I must, of course." "Yes, she's really rather beautiful. Also, she dances rather better than any other girl in town. Go and perform your painful duty." "Perhaps I'd better," said Richard thoughtfully, not perceiving the satire. "At any rate, I'll ask her for the next." He found it unengaged. There came to Laura's face an April change as he approached, and she saw he meant to ask her to dance. And, as they swam out into the maelstrom, he noticed it, and remarked that it was rather warm, to which she replied by a cheerful nod. Presently there came into Richard's mind the thought that he was really an excellent dancer, but he did not recall that he had always formed the same pleasing estimate of himself when he danced with Laura, nor realize that other young men enjoyed similar self-help when dancing with her. And yet he repeated to her what Ray had said of her dancing, and when she laughed as an appreciation of a thing intended humorously, he laughed too, but insisted that she did dance very well indeed. She laughed again at that, and they danced on, not talking. He had no sense of guiding her. There was no feeling of effort whatever. She seemed to move spontaneously with his wish, not to his touch. Indeed, he was not sensible of touching her at all. "Why, Laura!" he exclaimed suddenly, "you dance beautifully." She stumbled and almost fell, saved herself by clutching at his arm. He caught her, and the pair stopped where they were, in the middle of the floor. A flash of dazed incredulity from her dark eyes swept him. There was something in it of the child dodging an unexpected blow. "Did I trip you?" he asked anxiously. "No," she laughed quickly, and her cheeks grew even redder. "I tripped myself. Wasn't that too bad, just when you were thinking that I danced well. Let's sit down, may we?" They went to some chairs against a wall. There, as they sat, Cora swung by them, dancing again with her lieutenant, and looking up tranceedly into the gallant eyes of the triumphant and intoxicated young man. Visibly, she was a woman with a suitor's embracing arm about her. Richard's eyes followed them. "Ah, don't," said Laura in a low voice. He turned to her. "Don't what?" "I didn't mean to speak out loud," she said, tremulously. "But I meant, don't look so troubled. It doesn't mean anything at all. Her coquetting with that bird of passage. He's going away in the morning." "I don't think I was troubling about that." "Well, whatever it was." She paused, and laughed with a plaintive timidity. "Why, just don't trouble about it." "Do I look very much troubled?" he asked seriously. "Yes. And you don't look very gay when you're not." She laughed with more assurance now. "I think you're always the wistfulest looking man I ever saw." "Everybody laughs at me, I believe," he said, with continued seriousness. "Even Ray Vilas thinks I'm an utter fool. Am I, do you think?" He turned as he spoke, and glanced inquiringly into her eyes. What he saw surprised and dismayed him. "For heaven's sake, don't cry," he whispered hurriedly. She bent her head, turning her face from him. "I've been very hopeful lately," he said. "Cora has been so kind to me since I did what she wanted me to, that I—" He gave a deep sigh. "But if you're that sorry for me, my chances with her must be pretty desperate." She did not alter her attitude, but with her down-bent face still away from him, said huskily: "It isn't you I'm sorry for. You mustn't ever give up. You must keep on trying and trying. If you give up, I don't know what will become of her." A moment later she rose suddenly to her feet. "Let's finish our dance," she said, giving him her hand. "I'm sure I won't stumble again." Chapter 16. Chapter 16 of The Flirt, by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The two girls let themselves into the house noiselessly, and, turning out the hall light, left for them by their mother, crept upstairs on tiptoe, and went through the upper hall directly to Laura's room, Cora's being nearer the sick room. At their age it is proper that a gaiety be used 3 times: in anticipation, and actually, and in after rehearsal. The last was of course now in order. They went to Laura's room to "talk it over." There was no gas fixture in this small chamber, but they found Laura's oil lamp burning brightly upon her writing table. "How queer," said Laura with some surprise, as she closed the door. "Mother never leaves the lamp lit for me. She's always so afraid of lamps exploding." "Perhaps Miss Peirce came in here to read, and forgot to turn it out," suggested Cora, seating herself on the edge of the bed and letting her silk wrap fall from her shoulders. "Oh, Laura, wasn't he gorgeous?" She referred to the gallant defender of our seas, it appeared, and while Laura undressed and got into a wrapper, Cora recounted in detail the history of the impetuous sailor's enthrallment. A résumé predicted 3 hours earlier by a gleeful whisper hissed across the maritime shoulder as the sisters swung near each other during a waltz: "Proposed." "I've always heard they're horribly inconstant," she said regretfully. "But oh, Laura, wasn't he beautiful to look at? Do you think he's more beautiful than Val? No, don't tell me if you do. I don't want to hear it. Val was so provoking, he didn't seem to mind at all. He's nothing but a big brute sometimes. He wouldn't even admit that he minded, when I asked him. I was idiot enough to ask. I couldn't help it. He was so tantalizing and exasperating, laughing at me. I never knew anybody like him. He's so sure of himself, and he can be so cold. Sometimes I wonder if he really cares about anything, deep down in his heart, anything except himself. He seems so selfish. There are times when he almost makes me hate him. But just when I get to thinking I do, I find I don't. He's so deliciously strong. And there's such a big luxury in being understood. I always feel he knows me clear to the bone, somehow. But oh," she sighed regretfully, "doesn't a uniform become a man? They ought to all wear 'em. It would look silly on such a little goat as that Wade Trumble, though. Nothing could make him look like a whole man. Did you see him glaring at me? Beast! I was going to be so nice and kittenish and do all my prettiest tricks for him, to help Val with his oil company. Val thinks Wade would come in yet if I'd only get him in the mood to have another talk with Val about it. But the spiteful little rat wouldn't come near me. I believe that was one of the reasons Val laughed at me and pretended not to mind my getting proposed to. He must have minded. He couldn't have helped minding, really. That's his way. He's so mean. He won't show things. He knows me. I can't keep anything from him. He reads me like a signboard. And then about himself he keeps me guessing, and I can't tell whether I've guessed right. Ray Vilas behaved disgustingly, of course. He was horrid and awful. I might have expected it. I suppose Richard was wailing his tiresome sorrows on your poor shoulder." "No," said Laura. "He was very cheerful. He seemed glad you were having a good time." "He didn't look particularly cheerful at me. I never saw so slow a man. I wonder when he's going to find out about that pendant. Val would have seen it the instant I put it on. And, oh, Laura, isn't George Watling funny? He's just soft. He's good looking, though," she continued pensively, adding, "I promised to motor out to the country club with him tomorrow for tea." "Oh, Cora!" protested Laura. "No, please don't." "I've promised, so I'll have to now." Cora laughed. "It'll do Mary Kane good. Oh, I'm not going to bother much with him. He makes me tired. I never saw anything so complacent as that girl when she came in tonight, as if her little Georgie was the greatest capture the world had ever seen." She chattered on. Laura, passive, listened with a thoughtful expression, somewhat preoccupied. The talker yawned at last. "It must be getting after 3," she said, listlessly, having gone over her evening so often that the colors were beginning to fade. She yawned again. "Laura," she remarked absently, "I don't see how you can sleep in this bed. It sags so." "I've never noticed it," said her sister. "It's a very comfortable old bed." Cora went to her to be unfastened, reverting to the lieutenant during the operation, and kissing the tired woman warmly at its conclusion. "You're always so sweet to me, Laura," she said affectionately. "I don't know how you manage it. You're so good." She laughed. "Sometimes I wonder how you stand me. If I were you, I'm positive I couldn't stand me at all." Another kiss and a hearty embrace, and she picked up her wrap and scurried silently through the hall to her own room. It was very late, but Laura wrote for almost an hour in her book, which was undisturbed, before she felt drowsy. Then she extinguished the lamp, put the book away, and got into bed. It was almost as if she had attempted to lie upon the empty air. The mattress sagged under her weight as if it had been a hammock. And something tore with a ripping sound. There was a crash, and a choked yell from a muffled voice somewhere as the bed gave way. For an instant Laura fought wildly in an entanglement of what she insufficiently perceived to be springs, slats, and bedclothes with something alive squirming underneath. She cleared herself and sprang free, screaming, but even in her fright she remembered her father and clapped her hand over her mouth that she might keep from screaming again. She dove at the door, opened it, and fled through the hall to Cora's room, still holding her hand over her mouth. "Cora! Oh, Cora!" she panted, and flung herself upon her sister's bed. Cora was up instantly, and had lit the gas in a trice. "There's a burglar!" Laura contrived to gasp. "In my room, under the bed." "What?" "I fell on him. Something's the matter with the bed. It broke. I fell on him." Cora stared at her wide-eyed. "Why, it can't be. Think how long I was in there. Your bed broke, and you just thought there was someone there. You imagined it." "No, no, no," wailed Laura. "I heard him. He gave a kind of dreadful grunt." "Are you sure?" "Sure? He wriggled. Oh, I could feel him." Cora seized a box of matches again. "I'm going to find out." "Oh, no, no," protested Laura, cowering. "Yes, I am. If there's a burglar in the house, I'm going to find him." "We mustn't wake papa." "No, nor mama either. You stay here if you want to." "Let's call Hedrick," suggested the pallid Laura. "Or put our heads out of the window and scream for—" Cora laughed. She was not in the least frightened. "That wouldn't wake papa, of course." "If we had a telephone I'd send for the police, but we haven't. I'm going to see if there's anyone there. A burglar's a man, I guess, and I can't imagine myself being afraid of any man." Laura clung to her, but Cora shook her off and went through the hall undaunted, Laura faltering behind her. Cora lighted matches with a perfectly steady hand. She hesitated on the threshold of Laura's room no more than a moment, then lit the lamp. Laura stifled a shriek at the sight of the bed. "Look! Look!" she gasped. "There's no one under it now, that's certain," said Cora, and boldly lifted a corner of it. "Why, it's been cut all to pieces from underneath. You're right, there was someone here. It's practically dismembered. Don't you remember my telling you how it sagged? And I was only sitting on the edge of it. The slats have all been moved out of place, and as for the mattress, it's just a mess of springs and that stuffing stuff. He must have thought the silver was hidden there." "Oh, oh, oh," moaned Laura. "He wriggled. Ugh." Cora picked up the lamp. "Well, we've got to go over the house." "No, no." "Hush. I'll go alone then." "You can't." "I will, though." The two girls had changed places in this emergency. In her fright, Laura was dependent, clinging. Actual contact with the intruder had unnerved her. It took all her will to accompany her sister upon the tour of inspection, and throughout she cowered behind the dauntless Cora. It was the first time in their lives that their positions had been reversed. From the days of Cora's babyhood, Laura had formed the habit of petting and shielding the little sister, but now that the possibility became imminent of confronting an unknown and dangerous man, Laura was so shaken that, overcome by fear, she let Cora go first. Cora had not boasted in vain of her bravery. In truth, she was not afraid of any man. They found the fastenings of the doors secure, and likewise those of all the windows, until they came to the kitchen. There, the cook had left a window up, which plausibly explained the marauder's mode of ingress. Then, at Cora's insistence, and to Laura's shivering horror, they searched both cellar and garret, and concluded that he had escaped by the same means. Except Laura's bed, nothing in the house had been disturbed. But this eccentricity on the part of a burglar, though it indeed struck the two girls as peculiar, was not so pointedly mysterious to them as it might have been had they possessed a somewhat greater familiarity with the habits of criminals whose crimes are professional. They finally retired, Laura sleeping with her sister, and Cora had begun to talk of the lieutenant again, instead of the burglar, before Laura fell asleep. In spite of the short hours for sleep, both girls appeared at the breakfast table before the meal was over, and were naturally pleased with the staccato of excitement evoked by their news. Mrs. Madison and Miss Peirce were warm in admiration of their bravery, but in the same breath condemned it as foolhardy. "I never knew such wonderful girls!" exclaimed the mother, almost tearfully. "You crazy little lions! To think of your not even waking Hedrick! And you didn't have even a poker and were in your bare feet, and went down to the cellar!" "It was all Cora," protested Laura. "I'm a hopeless, disgusting coward. I never knew what a coward I was before. Cora carried the lamp and went ahead like a drum major. I just trailed along behind her, ready to shriek and run or faint." "Could you tell anything about him when you fell on him?" inquired Miss Peirce. "What was his voice like when he shouted?" "Choked. It was a horrible, jolted kind of cry. It hardly sounded human." "Could you tell anything about whether he was a large man or small or—" "Only that he seemed very active. He seemed to be kicking. He wriggled. Ugh!" They evolved a plausible theory of the burglar's motives and line of reasoning. "You see," said Miss Peirce, much stirred, in summing up the adventure, "he either jimmies the window or finds it open already, and Sarah's mistaken and she did leave it open. Then he searched the downstairs first and didn't find anything. Then he came upstairs, and was afraid to come into any of the rooms where we were. He could tell which rooms had people in them by hearing us breathing through the keyholes. He finds 2 rooms empty, and probably he made a thorough search of Miss Cora's first. But he isn't after silver toilet articles and pretty little things like that. He wants real big booty or none. So he decides that an out-of-the-way, unimportant room like Miss Laura's is where the family would be most apt to hide valuables, jewelry, and silver, and he knows that mattresses have often been selected as hiding places. So he gets under the bed and goes to work. Then Miss Cora and Miss Laura come in so quietly, not wanting to wake anybody, that he doesn't hear them, and he gets caught there. That's the way it must have been." "But why," Mrs. Madison inquired of this authority, "why do you suppose he lit the lamp?" "To see by," answered the ready Miss Peirce. It was accepted as final. Further discussion was temporarily interrupted by the discovery that Hedrick had fallen asleep in his chair. "Don't bother him, Cora," said his mother. "He's finished eating. Let him sleep a few minutes, if he wants to, before he goes to school. He's not at all well. He played too hard yesterday afternoon and hurt his knee, he said. He came down limping this morning and looked very badly. He oughtn't to run and climb about the stable so much after school. See how utterly exhausted he looks. Not even this excitement can keep him awake." "I think we must be careful not to let Mr. Madison suspect anything about the burglar," said Miss Peirce. "It would be bad for him." Laura began, "But we ought to notify the police." "Police!" Hedrick woke so abruptly, and uttered the word with such passionate and vehement protest, that everybody started. "I suppose you want to kill your father, Laura Madison?" "How?" "Do you suppose he wouldn't know something had happened with a squad of big, heavy policemen tromping all over the house? The first thing they'd do would be to search the whole place." "Oh, no," said Mrs. Madison quickly. "It wouldn't do at all." "I should think not. I'm glad," continued Hedrick truthfully, "that idea's out of your head. I believe Laura imagined the whole thing anyway." "Have you looked at her mattress?" inquired Cora. "Darling little boy!" He gave her a concentrated look, and rose to leave. "Nothin' on earth but imagina—" He stopped with a grunt as he forgetfully put his weight on his left leg. He rubbed his knee, swallowed painfully, and, leaving the word unfinished, limped haughtily from the room. He left the house, gloomily swinging his books from a spare length of strap, and walking with care to ease his strains and bruises as much as possible. He was very low in his mind, that boy. His fortunes had reached the ebb tide, but he had no hope of a rise. He had no hope of anything. It was not even a consolation that, through his talent for surprise and waylayings, it had lately been thought necessary, by the Villard family, to have Egerton accompanied to and from school by a manservant. Nor was Hedrick more deeply depressed by the certainty that both public and domestic scandal must soon arise from the inevitable revelation of his discontinuing his attendance at school, without mentioning this important change of career at home. He had been truant a full fortnight, under brighter circumstances a matter for a lawless pride. Now he had neither fear nor vainglory. There was no room in him for anything but dejection. He walked 2 blocks in the direction of his school, turned a corner, walked half a block, turned north in the alley which ran parallel to Corliss Street, and a few moments later had cautiously climbed into an old, disused refuse box which stood against the rear wall of the empty stable at his own home. He pried up some loose boards at the bottom of the box, and entered a tunnel which had often served in happier days, when he had friends, for the escape of Union officers from Libby Prison and Andersonville. Emerging, wholly soiled, into a box stall, he crossed the musty carriage house and ascended some rickety steps to a long vacant coachman's room, next to the hayloft. He closed the door, bolted it, and sank moodily upon a broken old horsehair sofa. This apartment was his studio. In addition to the sofa, it contained an ex-bureau, 3 chair-like shapes, a once marble-topped table, now covered with a sheet of zinc, 2 empty bird cages, and a condemned what-not. The walls were rather over-decorated in colored chalks, the man-headed snake motif predominating. They were also loopholed for firing into the hayloft. Upon the table lay a battered spyglass, minus lenses, and nearby 2 boxes, one containing dried corn silk, the other hayseed, convenient for the making of amateur cigarettes. The smoker's outfit being completed by a neat pile of rectangular clippings from newspapers. On the shelves of the whatnot were some fragments of a dead pie, the relics of a '15 puzzle, a pink Easter egg, 4 seashells, a tambourine with part of a girl's face still visible in aged colors, about 2/3 of a hot water bag, a tintype of Hedrick, and a number of books, several by Henty, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, 100 Practical Jokes Easy to Perform, The Jungle Book, My Lady Rotha, A Family Atlas, 3 Weeks, Pilgrim's Progress, A Boy's Life in Camp, and The Mystery of the Count's Bedroom. The gloomy eye of Hedrick wandered to The Mystery of the Count's Bedroom, and remained fixed upon it moodily and contemptuously. His own mystery made that one seem tame and easy. Laura's bedroom laid it all over the Count's, in his conviction; and with a soul too weary of pain to shudder, he reviewed the bafflements and final catastrophe of the preceding night. He had not essayed the attempt upon the mattress until assured that the house was wrapped in slumber. Then, with hope in his heart, he had stolen to Laura's room, lit the lamp, feeling safe from intrusion, and set to work. His implement at first was a long hatpin of Cora's. Lying on his back beneath the bed, and moving the slats as it became necessary, he sounded every cubic inch of the mysterious mattress without encountering any obstruction which could reasonably be supposed to be the ledger. This was not more puzzling than it was infuriating, since by all processes of induction, deduction, and pure logic, the thing was necessarily there. It was nowhere else. Therefore it was there. It had to be there. With the great blade of his Boy Scout's knife he began to disembowel the mattress. For a time he had worked furiously and effectively, but the position was awkward, the search laborious, and he was obliged to rest frequently. Besides, he had waited to a later hour than he knew, for his mother to go to bed, and during one of his rests he incautiously permitted his eyes to close. When he woke, his sisters were in the room, and he thought it advisable to remain where he was, though he little realized how he had weakened his shelter. When Cora left the room, he heard Laura open the window, sigh, and presently a tiny clinking and a click set him a tingle from head to foot. She was opening the padlocked book. The scratching sound of a pen followed. And yet she had not come near the bed. The mattress, then, was a living lie. With infinite caution he had moved so that he could see her, arriving at a coign of vantage just as she closed the book. She locked it, wrapped it in an oilskin cover which lay beside it on the table, hung the key chain round her neck, rose, yawned, and, to his violent chagrin, put out the light. He heard her moving, but could not tell where, except that it was not in his part of the room. Then a faint shuffling warned him that she was approaching the bed, and he withdrew his head to avoid being stepped upon. The next moment the world seemed to cave in upon him. Laura's flight had given him opportunity to escape to his own room unobserved, there to examine, bathe and bind his wounds, and to rectify his first hasty impression that he had been fatally mangled. Hedrick glared at The Mystery of the Count's Bedroom. By and by he got up, brought the book to the sofa, and began to read it over. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17 of The Flirt, by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The influence of a familiar and sequestered place is not only soothing, the bruised mind may often find it restorative. Thus Hedrick, in his studio, surrounded by his loved bric-a-brac, began to feel once more the stir of impulse. 2 hours' reading inspired him. What a French reporter, in the Count's bedroom, could do, an American youth in full possession of his powers, except for a strained knee and other injuries, could do. Yes, and would. He evolved a new chain of reasoning. The ledger had been seen in Laura's room. It had been heard in Laura's room. It appeared to be kept in Laura's room. But it was in no single part of the room. All the parts made a whole. Therefore, the book was not in the room. On the other hand, Laura had not left the room when she took the book from its hiding place. This was confusing. Therefore, he determined to concentrate logic solely upon what she had done with the ledger when she finished writing in it. It was dangerous to assume that she had restored it to the place whence she obtained it, because he had already proved that place to be both in the room and out of the room. No, the question he must keep in was, what did she do with it? Laura had not left the room, but the book had left the room. Arrived at this inevitable deduction, he sprang to his feet in a state of repressed excitement and began to pace the floor, like a hound on the trail. Laura had not left the room, but the book had left the room. He must keep his mind upon this point. He uttered a loud exclamation and struck the zinc table top a smart blow with his clenched fist. Laura had thrown the book out of the window. In the exultation of this triumph, he forgot that it was not yet the hour for a scholar's reappearance, and went forth in haste to search the ground beneath the window, a disappointing quest, for nowhere in the yard was there anything but withered grass and the rubbish of other frost-bitten vegetation. His mother, however, discovered something else, and, opening the kitchen window, she asked with surprise, "Why, Hedrick, what on earth are you doing here?" "Me?" inquired Hedrick. "What are you doing here?" "Here?" Evidently she puzzled him. She became emphatic. "I want to know what you are doing." "Just standing here," he explained in a meek, grieved way. "But why aren't you at school?" This recalled what he had forgotten, and he realized the insecurity of his position. "Oh, yes," he said. "School. Did you ask me—" "Didn't you go to school?" He began to speak rapidly. "Didn't I go to school? Well, where else could I go? Just because I'm here now doesn't mean I didn't go, does it? Because a person is in China right now wouldn't have to mean he'd never been in South America, would it?" "Then what's the matter?" "Well, I was going along, and you know I didn't feel very well, and—" He paused, with the advent of a happier idea, then continued briskly, "But that didn't stop me, because I thought I ought to go if I dropped, so I went ahead, but the teacher was sick, and they couldn't get a substitute. She must have been pretty sick, she looked so pale." "They dismissed the class?" "And I don't have to go tomorrow, either." "I see," said his mother. "But if you feel ill, Hedrick, hadn't you better come in and lie down?" "I think it's kind of passing off. The fresh air seems to be doing me good." "Be careful of your sore knee, dear." She closed the window, and he was left to continue his operations in safety. Laura had thrown the ledger out of the window. That was proved absolutely. Obviously, she had come down before daylight and retrieved it. Or she had not. Proceeding on the assumption that she had not, he lifted his eyes and searched the air. Was it possible that the book, though thrown from the window, had never reached the ground? The branches of an old and stalwart maple, now almost divested of leaves, extended in rough symmetry above him, and one big limb, reaching out toward the house, came close to Laura's windows. Triumph shone again from the shrewd countenance of the sleuth. Laura must have slid the ledger along a wire into a hollow branch. However, no wire was to be seen, and the shrewd countenance of the sleuth fell. But perhaps she had constructed a device of silk threads, invisible from below, which carried the book into the tree. Action! He climbed carefully but with many twinges, finally pausing in a parlous situation not far from the mysterious window which Laura had opened the night before. A comprehensive survey of the tree revealed only the very patent fact that none of the branches was of sufficient diameter to conceal the ledger. No silk threads came from the window. He looked and looked and looked at that window. Then his eye fell a little, halted less than 3 feet below the window ledge, and the search was ended. The kitchen window which his mother had opened was directly beneath Laura's, and was a very long, narrow window, in the style of the house, and there was a protecting stone ledge above it. Upon this ledge lay the book, wrapped in its oilskin covering, and secured from falling by a piece of broken iron hooping, stuck in the mortar of the bricks. It could be seen from nowhere save an upper window of the house next door, or from the tree itself, and in either case only when the leaves had fallen. Laura had felt very safe. No one had ever seen the book except that night, early in August, when, for a better circulation of air, she had left her door open as she wrote, and Hedrick had come upon her. He had not spoken of it again. She perceived that he had forgotten it, and she herself forgot that the memory of a boy is never to be depended on. Its forgettings are too seldom permanent in the case of things that ought to stay forgotten. To get the book one had only to lean from the window. Hedrick seemed so ill during lunch that his mother spoke of asking Doctor Sloane to look at him, if he did not improve before evening. Hedrick said meekly that perhaps that would be best, if he did not improve. After a futile attempt to eat, he courteously excused himself from the table, a ceremony which made even Cora fear that his case might be serious, and, going feebly to the library, stretched himself upon the sofa. His mother put a rug over him. Hedrick, thanking her touchingly, closed his eyes, and she went away, leaving him to slumber. After a time Laura came into the room on an errand, walking noiselessly, and, noticing that his eyes were open, apologized for waking him. "Never mind," he returned, in the tone of an invalid. "I didn't sleep sound. I think there's something the matter inside my head. I have such terrible dreams. I guess maybe it's better for me to keep awake. I'm kind of afraid to go to sleep. Would you mind staying here with me a little while?" "Certainly I'll stay," she said, and observing that his cheeks were flushed, and his eyes unusually bright, she laid a cool hand on his forehead. "You haven't any fever, dear. That's good. You'll be all right tomorrow. Would you like me to read to you?" "I believe," he answered plaintively, "reading might kind of disturb my mind. My brain feels so sort of restless and queer. I'd rather play some kind of game." "Cards?" "No, not cards exactly. Something I can do lying down." "Oh, I know. You remember the one where we drew pictures and the others had to guess what they were? Well, I've invented a game like that. You sit down at the desk over there and take some sheets of paper. I'll tell you the rest." She obeyed. "What next?" "Now, I'll describe some people, and where they live, and not tell you who they are, and you see if you can guess their names and addresses." "Addresses, too?" "Yes, because I'm going to describe the way their houses look. Write each name on a separate sheet of paper, and the number of their house below it if you know it, and if you don't know it, just the street. If it's a woman, put Miss, or Mrs., before their name, and if it's a man, write Esquire after it." "Is all that necessary for the game?" "It's the way I invented it, and I think you might—" "Oh, all right," she acquiesced good-naturedly. "It shall be according to your rules." "Then afterward you give me the sheets of paper with the names and addresses written on 'em, and we—" He hesitated. "Yes? What do we do then?" "I'll tell you when we come to it." But when that stage of his invention was reached, and Laura had placed the inscribed sheets in his hand, his interest had waned, it appeared. Also, his condition had improved. "Let's quit. I thought this game would be more exciting," he said, sitting up. "I guess," he added with too much modesty, "I'm not very good at inventing games. I b'lieve I'll go out to the barn. I think the fresh air—" "Do you feel well enough to go out?" she asked. "You do seem to be all right, though." Yes, I'm a lot better, I think." He limped to the door. "The fresh air will be the best thing for me." She did not notice that he carelessly retained her contributions to the game, and he reached his studio with them in his hand. Hedrick had reached the teens, and he was a reader. Things in his head might have dismayed a Borgia. No remotest glimpse entered that head of the enormity of what he did. To put an end to his punishing of Cora, and to render him powerless against that habitual and natural enemy, Laura had revealed a horrible incident in his career. It had become a public scandal. He was the sport of fools, and it might be months before the thing was lived down. Now he had the means, as he believed, to even the score with both sisters at a stroke. To him it was turning a tremendous and properly scathing joke upon them. He did not hesitate. That evening, as Richard Lindley sat at dinner with his mother, Joe Varden temporarily abandoned his attendance at the table to answer the front doorbell. Upon his return, he remarked, "Messenger boy must have been in a big hurry. Wouldn't wait till I git to door." "What was it?" asked Richard. "Boy with package. Least, I reckon it were a boy. Call back from the front walk. Say he couldn't wait. Say he left package in vestibule." "What sort of a package?" "Middle size kind of big package." "Why don't you see what it is, Richard?" Mrs. Lindley asked of her son. "Bring it to the table, Joe." When it was brought, Richard looked at the superscription with surprise. The wrapper was of a heavy brown paper, and upon it a sheet of white note paper had been pasted, with the address, Richard Lindley, Esquire, 1218 Corliss Street. "It's from Laura Madison," he said, staring at this writing. "What in the world would Laura be sending me?" "You might possibly learn by opening it," suggested his mother. "I've seen men puzzle over the outside of things quite as often as women. Laura Madison is a nice girl." She never volunteered similar praise of Laura Madison's sister. Mrs. Lindley had submitted to her son's plans concerning Cora, lately confided, but her submission lacked resignation. "It's a book," said Richard, even more puzzled, as he took the ledger from its wrappings. "Two little torn places at the edge of the covers. Looks as if it had once had clasps." "Perhaps it's the Madison family album," Mrs. Lindley suggested. "Pictures of Cora since infancy. I imagine she's had plenty taken." "No." He opened the book and glanced at the pages covered in Laura's clear, readable hand. "No, it's about half full of writing. Laura must have turned literary." He read a line or two, frowning mildly. "My soul, I believe it's a novel. She must think I'm a critic, to want me to read it." Smiling at the idea, he closed the ledger. "I'll take it upstairs to my hangout after dinner, and see if Laura's literary manner has my august approval. Who in the world would ever have thought she'd decide to set up for a writer?" "I imagine she might have something to write worth reading," said his mother. "I've always thought she was an interesting looking girl." "Yes, she is. She dances well, too." "Of course," continued Mrs. Lindley thoughtfully. "She seldom says anything interesting, but that may be because she so seldom has a chance to say anything at all." Richard refused to perceive this allusion. "Curious that Laura should have sent it to me," he said. "She's never seemed interested in my opinion about anything. I don't recall her ever speaking to me on any subject whatever, except one." He returned his attention to his plate, but his mother did not appear to agree with him that the topic was exhausted. "Except one?" she repeated, after waiting for some time. "Yes," he replied, in his habitual preoccupied and casual tone. "Or perhaps two. Not more than two, I should say, and in a way you'd call that only one, of course. Bread, Joe." "What two, Richard?" "Cora," he said, with gentle simplicity, "and me." Chapter 18 of The Flirt by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Mrs. Lindley had arranged for her son a small apartment on the second floor, and it was in his own library and smoking room that Richard, comfortable in a leather chair by a reading lamp, after dinner, opened Laura's ledger. The first page displayed no more than a date, now 18 months past, and the line, "Love came to me today." The next page was dated the next day, and beneath he read, "That was all I could write yesterday. I think I was too excited to write. Something seemed to be singing in my breast. I couldn't think in sentences, not even in words. How queer it is that I had decided to keep a diary, and bound this book for it, and now the first thing I have written in it was that. It will not be a diary. It shall be your book. I shall keep it sacred to you and write to you in it. How strange it will be if the day ever comes when I shall show it to you. If I should, you would not laugh at it, for of course the day couldn't come unless you understood. I cannot think it will ever come, that day. But maybe. No, I mustn't let myself hope too much that it will, because if I got to hoping too much, and you didn't like me, it would hurt too much. People who expect nothing are never disappointed. I must keep that in mind. Yet every girl has a right to hope for her own man to come for her sometime, hasn't she? It's not easy to discipline the wanting to hope, since yesterday. I think I must always have thought a great deal about you without knowing it. We really know so little what we think. Our minds are going on all the time, and we hardly notice them. It is like a queer sort of factory. The owner only looks in once in a while, and most of the time hasn't any idea what sort of goods his spindles are turning out. I saw you yesterday. It seems to me the strangest thing in the world. I've seen you by chance, probably 2 or 3 times a month nearly all my life, though you so seldom come here to call. And this time wasn't different from dozens of other times. You were just standing on the corner by the Richfield, waiting for a car. The only possible difference is that you had been out of town for several months. Cora said so this morning. And how ridiculous it seems now, didn't even know it. I hadn't noticed it, not with the top part of my mind, but perhaps the deep part, that does the real thinking, had noticed it and had mourned your absence and was so glad to see you again that it made the top part suddenly see the wonderful truth." Lindley set down the ledger to relight his cigar. It struck him that Laura had been writing very odd stuff, but interesting. And certainly it was not a story. Vaguely he recalled Marie Bashkirtseff. Hadn't she done something like this? He resumed reading. "You turned and spoke to me in that lovely, cordial, absent-minded way of yours, though I'd never thought, with the top part, what a lovely way it was. And for a moment I only noticed how nice you looked in a light gray suit, because I'd only seen you in black for so long, while you'd been in mourning for your brother." Richard, disturbed by an incredible idea, read these last words over, and then dismissed the notion as nonsense. "While you'd been in mourning for your brother, and it struck me that light gray was becoming to you. Then such a queer thing happened. I felt the great kindness of your eyes. I thought they were full of the only word that seems to express it at all is charity. And they had a sweet, far-away look, too, and I've always thought that a look of wistful kindness was the loveliest look in the world, and you had it, and I saw it, and then suddenly, as you held your hat in your hand, the sunshine on your hair seemed brighter than any sunshine I had ever seen, and I began to tremble all over. I didn't understand what was the matter with me, or what made me afraid with you, not of you, all at once, but I was so hopelessly rattled that instead of waiting for the car, as I'd just told you I meant to, I said I'd decided to walk, and got away, without any breath left to breathe with. I couldn't have gotten on the car with you, and I couldn't have spoken another word. And as I walked home, trembling all the way, I saw that strange, dazzling sunshine on your hair, and the wistful, kind look in your eyes, You seemed not to have taken the car, but to have come with me, and I was uplifted and exalted, oh, so strangely. Oh, how the world was changing for me! And when I got near home, I began to walk faster, and on the front path I broke into a run and rushed in the house to the piano, and it was as if my fingers were thirsty for the keys. Then I saw that I was playing to you, and knew that I loved you. I love you. How different everything is now from everything before. Music means what it never did. Life has leaped into blossom for me. Everywhere there is color and radiance that I had never seen. The air is full of perfume. Dear, the sunshine that fell upon your head has spread over the world. I understand, as I never understood, that the world, so dazzling to me now, was made for love, and is meaningless without it. The years until yesterday are gray. No, not gray, because that was the color you were wearing. Not gray, because that is a beautiful color. The empty years until yesterday had no color at all. Yes, the world has meaning only through loving, and without meaning there is no real life. We live only by loving, and now that this gift of life has come to me, I love all the world. I feel that I must be so kind, kind to everybody. Such an odd thing struck me as my greatest wish. When I was little, I remember grandmother telling me how, when she was a child in pioneer days, the women made the men's clothes, homespun, and how a handsome young circuit rider, who was a bachelor, seemed to her the most beautifully dressed man she had ever seen. The women of the different churches made his clothes, as they did their husbands and brothers, you see, only better. It came into my head that that would be the divinest happiness that I could know, to sew for you. If you and I lived in those old, old times, you look as if you belonged to them, you know, dear. And you were the young minister riding into the settlement on a big bay horse, and all the girls at the window, of course, and I sewing away at the homespun for you. I think all the angels of heaven would be choiring in my heart, and what thick, warm clothes I'd make you for winter. Perhaps in heaven they'll let some of the women sew for the men they love. I wonder. I hear Cora's voice from downstairs as I write. She's often so angry with Ray, poor girl. It does not seem to me that she and Ray really belong to each other, though they say so often that they do. Richard, having read thus far with a growing, vague uneasiness, looked up, frowning. He hoped Laura had no Marie Bashkirtseff idea of publishing this manuscript. It was too intimate, he thought, even if the names in it were to be disguised. Though they say so often that they do. I think Ray is in love with her, but it can't be like this. What he feels must be something wholly different. There is violence and wildness in it, and they are bitter with each other so often, always getting even for something. He does care. He is frantically in love with her, undoubtedly, but so insanely jealous. I suppose all jealousy is insane, but love is the only sanity. How can what is insane be part of it? I could not be jealous of you. I owe life to you. I have never lived till now. The next writing was 2 days later. Today, as I passed your house with Cora, I kept looking at the big front door at which you go in and out so often, your door. I never knew that just a door could be so beautiful. And unconsciously I kept my eyes on it as we walked on, turning my head and looking back at it, till Cora suddenly burst out laughing and said, "Well, Laura!" And I came to myself, and found her looking at me. It was like getting back after a journey, and for a second I was a little dazed, and Cora kept on laughing at me, and I felt myself getting red. I made some silly excuse about thinking your house had been repainted, and she laughed louder than ever. I was afraid then that she understood. I wonder if she could have. I hope not, though I love her so much I don't know why I would rather she didn't know, unless it is just my feeling about it. It is a guardian feeling, that I must keep for myself, the music of these angels singing in my heart, singing of you. I hope she did not understand, and I so fear she did. Why should I be so afraid? 2 days since I have talked to you in your book after Cora caught me staring at your door and laughed at me, and 10 minutes ago I was sitting beside the actual you on the porch. I am trembling yet. It was the first time you'd come for months and months, and yet you had the air of thinking it rather a pleasant thing to do as you came up the steps, and a dizzy feeling came over me, because I wondered if it was seeing me on the street that day that put it into your head to come. It seemed too much happiness, and risking too much, to let myself believe it, but I couldn't help just wondering. I began to tremble as I saw you coming up our side of the street in the moonlight, and when you turned in here I was all panic. I nearly ran into the house. I don't know how I found voice to greet you. I didn't seem to have any breath left at all. I was so relieved when Cora took a chair between us and began to talk to you, because I'm sure I couldn't have. She and poor Ray had been having one of their quarrels, and she was punishing him. Poor boy, he seemed so miserable, though he tried to talk to me about politics, I think, though I'm not sure, because I couldn't listen much better than either of us could talk. I could only hear your voice. Such a rich, quiet voice, and it has a sound like the look you have, friendly and far away and wistful. I have thought and thought about what it is that makes you look wistful. You have less to wish for than anybody else in the world because you have yourself. So why are you wistful? I think it's just because you are. I heard Cora asking you why you hadn't come to see us for so long, and then she said, "Is it because you dislike me? You look at me sometimes as if you dislike me." And I wished she hadn't said it. I had a feeling you wouldn't like that personal way of talking that she enjoys, and that, it didn't seem to be in keeping with the dignity of you. And I love Cora so much I wanted her to be finer with you. I wanted her to understand you better than to play those little charming tricks at you. You are so good, so high, that if she could make a real friend of you, I think it would be the best thing for her that could happen. She's never had a man friend. Perhaps she was trying to make one of you, and hasn't any other way to go about it. She can be so really sweet, I wanted you to see that side of her. After a while, when Ray couldn't bear it any longer to talk to me, and in his desperation brazenly took Cora to the other end of the porch almost by force, and I was left, in a way, alone with you, what did you think of me? I was tongue-tied. Oh, oh, oh! You were quiet, but I was dumb. My heart wasn't dumb, it hammered. All the time I kept saying to myself such a jumble of things, and into the jumble would come such a rapture that you were there. It was like a paean of happiness, a chanting of the glory of having you near me. I was mixed up. I could play all those confusing things, but writing them doesn't tell it. Writing them would only be like this: "He's here! He's here! Speak, you little fool! He's here! He's here! He's sitting beside you! Speak, idiot, or he'll never come back! He's here! He's beside you! You could put out your hand and touch him! Are you dead, that you can't speak? He's here! He's here! He's here!" Ah, some day I shall be able to talk to you, but not till I get more used to this inner song. It seems to will that nothing else comes from my lips till it does. In spite of my silence, my outward woodenness, you said, as you went away, that you would come again. You said soon. I could only nod, but Cora called from the other end of the porch and asked, "How soon?" Oh, I bless her for it, because you said, "Day after tomorrow." Day after tomorrow. Day after tomorrow. Day after tomorrow. 21 hours since I wrote, no, sang, "Day after tomorrow," and now it is tomorrow. Oh, the slow golden day that has been! I could not stay in the house. I walked no, I winged. I was in the open country before I knew it, with you. For you are in everything. I never knew the sky was blue before. Until now I just thought it was the sky. The whitest clouds I ever saw sailed over that blue, and I stood upon the prow of each in turn, then leaped and swam to the next and sailed with it. Oh, the beautiful sky, and kind green woods, and blessed, long, white, dusty country road! Never in my life shall I forget that walk, this day in the open with my love, you. Tomorrow, 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 tomorrow. The next writing in Laura's book was dated more than 2 months later. I have decided to write again in this book. I have thought it all out carefully, and I have come to the conclusion that it can do no harm, and may help me to be steady and sensible. It is the thought, not its expression, that is guilty. But I do not believe that my thoughts are guilty. I believe that they are good. I know that I wish only good. I have read that when people suffer very much the best thing is for them to cry. And so I'll let myself write out my feelings, and perhaps get rid of some of the silly self-pity I'm foolish enough to feel, instead of going about choked up with it. How queer it is that even when we keep our thoughts respectable we can't help having absurd feelings like self-pity, even though we know how rotten stupid they are. Yes, I'll let it all out here, and then, some day, when I've cured myself all whole again, I'll burn this poor silly old book. And if I'm not cured before the wedding, I'll burn it then, anyhow. How funny little girls are! From the time they're little bits of things they talk about marriage, whom they are going to marry, what sort of person it will be. I think Cora and I began when she was about 5, and I not 7. And as girls grow up, I don't believe there ever was one who genuinely expected to be an old maid. The most unattractive young girls discuss and plan and expect marriage just as much as the prettier and gayer ones. The only way we can find out that men don't want to marry us is by their not asking us. We don't see ourselves very well, and I honestly believe we all think, way deep down, that we're pretty attractive. At least, every girl has the idea, sometimes, that if men only saw the whole truth they'd think her as nice as any other girl, and really nicer than most others. But I don't believe I have any hallucinations of that sort about myself left. I can't imagine, now, any man seeing anything in me that would make him care for me. I can't see anything about me to care for, myself. Sometimes I think maybe I could make a man get excited about me if I could take a startlingly personal tone with him from the beginning, make him wonder all sorts of you and I perhapses, but I couldn't do it very well probably. Oh, I couldn't make myself do it if I could do it well. And I shouldn't think it would have much effect except upon very inexperienced men. Yet it does. Now, I wonder if this is a streak of sourness coming out. I don't feel bitter. I'm just thinking honestly, I'm sure. Well, here I am facing it. All through my later childhood, and all through my girlhood, I believe what really occupied me most, with the thought of it underlying all things else, though often buried very deep, was the prospect of my marriage. I regarded it as a certainty. I would grow up, fall in love, get engaged and be married, of course. So I grew up and fell in love with you, but it stops there, and I must learn how to be an old maid and not let anybody see that I mind it. I know this is the hardest part of it, the beginning. It will get easier by and by, of course. If I can just manage this part of it, it's bound not to hurt so much later on. Yes, I grew up and fell in love with you, for you will always be you. I'll never, never get over that, my dear. You'll never, never know it, but I shall love you always till I die, and if I'm still me after that, I shall keep right on loving you then, of course. You see, I didn't fall in love with you just to have you for myself. I fell in love with you. And that can never bother you at all, nor ever be a shame to me that I love unsought, because you won't know, and because it's just an ocean of good will, and every beat of my heart sends a new great wave of it toward you and Cora. I shall find happiness, I believe, in service. I am sure there will be times when I can serve you both. I love you both, and I can serve her for you and you for her. This isn't a hysterical mood, or a fit of exaltation. I have thought it all out, and I know that I can live up to it. You are the best thing that can ever come into her life, and everything I can do shall be to keep you there. I must be very, very careful with her, for talk and advice do not influence her much. You love her, she has accepted you, and it is beautiful for you both. It must be kept beautiful. It has all become so clear to me. You are just what she has always needed, and if by any mischance she lost you, I do not know what would become—" "Good God!" cried Richard. He sprang to his feet, and the heavy book fell with a muffled crash upon the floor, sprawling open upon its face, its leaves in disorder. He moved away from it, staring at it in incredulous dismay. But he knew. End of chapter 18. Chapter 19 of The Flirt by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Memory, that drowsy custodian, had wakened slowly, during this hour, beginning the process with fitful gleams of semi-consciousness, then, irritated, searching its pockets for the keys and dazedly exploring blind passages. But now it flung wide open the gallery doors, and there, in clear light, were the rows of painted canvases. He remembered that day, when he was waiting for a car, and Laura Madison had stopped for a moment, and then had gone on, saying she preferred to walk. He remembered that after he got into the car he wondered why he had not walked home with her, had thought himself slow for not thinking of it in time to do it. There had seemed something very taking about her, as she stopped and spoke to him, something enlivening and wholesome and sweet. It had struck him that Laura was a very nice girl. He had never before noticed how really charming she could look. In fact, he had never thought much about either of the Madison sisters, who had become young ladies during his mourning for his brother. And this pleasant image of Laura remained with him for several days, until he decided that it might be a delightful thing to spend an evening with her. He had called, and he remembered, now, Cora's saying to him that he looked at her sometimes as if he did not like her. He had been surprised and astonishingly pleased to detect a mysterious feeling in her about it. He remembered that almost at once he had fallen in love with Cora. She captivated him, enraptured him, as she still did, as she always would, he felt, no matter how she treated him or what she did to him. He did not analyze the process of the captivation and enrapturement, for love is a mystery and cannot be analyzed. This is so well known that even Richard Lindley knew it, and did not try. Heartsick, he stared at the fallen book. He was a man, and here was the proffered love of a woman he did not want. There was a pathos in the ledger. It seemed to grovel, sprawling and disheveled in the circle of lamplight on the floor. It was as if Laura herself lay pleading at his feet, and he looked down upon her, compassionate but revolted. He realized with astonishment from what a height she had fallen, how greatly he had respected her, how warmly liked her. What she now destroyed had been more important than he had guessed. Simple masculine indignation rose within him. She was to have been his sister. If she had been unable to stifle this misplaced love of hers, could she not at least have kept it to herself? Laura, the self-respecting. No, she offered it to her sister's betrothed. She had written that he should never, never know it, that when she was cured she would burn the ledger. She had not burned it. There were inconsistencies in plenty in the pitiful screed, but these were the wildest and the cheapest. In talk she had urged him to "keep trying" for Cora, and now the sick-minded creature sent him this record. She wanted him to know. Then what else was it but a plea? I love you. Let Cora go. Take me. He began to walk up and down, wondering what was to be done. After a time he picked up the book gingerly, set it upon a shelf in a dark corner, and went for a walk outdoors. The night air seemed better than that of the room that held the ledger. At the corner a boy, running, passed him. It was Hedrick Madison, but Hedrick did not recognize Richard, nor was his mind at that moment concerned with Richard's affairs. He was on an errand of haste to Doctor Sloane. Mr. Madison had wakened from a heavy slumber unable to speak, his condition obviously much worse. Hedrick returned in the doctor's car, and then hung uneasily about the door of the sick room until Laura came out and told him to go to bed. In the morning his mother did not appear at the breakfast table, Cora was serious and quiet, and Laura said that he need not go to school that day, though she added that the doctor thought their father would get better. She looked wan and hollow-eyed. She had not been to bed, but declared that she would rest after breakfast. Evidently she had not missed her ledger, and Hedrick watched her closely, a pleasurable excitement stirring in his breast. She did not go to her room after the meal. The house was cold, possessing no furnace, and, with Hedrick's assistance, she carried out the ashes from the library grate and built a fire there. She had just lighted it, and the kindling was beginning to crackle, glowing rosily over her tired face, when the bell rang. "Will you see who it is, please, Hedrick?" He went with alacrity, and returning, announced in an odd voice, "It's Dick Lindley. He wants to see you." "Me?" she murmured, wanly surprised. She was kneeling before the fireplace, wearing an old dress which was dusted with ashes, and upon her hands a pair of worn-out gloves of her father's. Lindley appeared in the hall behind Hedrick, carrying under his arm something wrapped in brown paper. His expression led her to think that he had heard of her father's relapse, and came on that account. "Don't look at me, Richard," she said, smiling faintly as she rose, and stripping her hands of the clumsy gloves. "It's good of you to come, though. Doctor Sloane thinks he is going to be better again." Richard inclined his head gravely, but did not speak. "Well," said Hedrick with a slight emphasis, "I guess I'll go out in the yard a while." And with shining eyes he left the room. In the hall, out of range from the library door, he executed a triumphant but noiseless caper, and doubled with mirth, clapping his hand over his mouth to stifle the effervescings of his joy. He had recognized the ledger in the same wrapping in which he had left it in Mrs. Lindley's vestibule. His moment had come, the climax of his enormous joke, the repayment in some small measure for the anguish he had so long endured. He crept silently back toward the door, flattened his back against the wall, and listened. "Richard," he heard Laura say, a vague alarm in her voice, "what is it? What is the matter?" Then Lindley, "I did not know what to do about it. I couldn't think of any sensible thing. I suppose what I am doing is the stupidest of all the things I thought of, but at least it's honest. So I've brought it back to you myself. Take it, please." There was a crackling of the stiff wrapping paper, a little pause, then a strange sound from Laura. It was not vocal, and no more than just audible. It was a prolonged scream in a whisper. Hedrick ventured an eye at the crack between the partly opened door and its casing. Lindley stood with his back to him, but the boy had a clear view of Laura. She was leaning against the wall, facing Richard, the book clutched in both arms against her bosom, the wrapping paper on the floor at her feet. "I thought of sending it back and pretending to think it had been left at my mother's house by mistake," said Richard sadly, "and of trying to make it seem that I hadn't read any of it. I thought of a dozen ways to pretend I believed you hadn't really meant me to read it." Making a crucial effort, she managed to speak. "You think I did mean?" "Well," he answered with a helpless shrug, "you sent it. But it's what's in it that really matters, isn't it? I could have pretended anything in a note, I suppose, if I had written instead of coming, but I found that what I most dreaded was meeting you again, and as we've got to meet, of course, it seemed to me the only thing to do was to blunder through a talk with you, somehow or another, and get that part of it over. I thought the longer I put off facing you, the worse it would be for both of us, and the more embarrassing. I'm no good at pretending anyhow, and the thing has happened. What use is there in not being honest? Well?" She did not try to speak again. Her state was lamentable. It was all in her eyes. Richard hung his head wretchedly, turning partly away from her. "There's only one way to look at it," he said hesitatingly, and stammering. That is, there's only one thing to do, to forget that it's happened. Oh, well, I care for Cora altogether. She's got never to know about this. She hasn't any idea or suspicion of it, has she?" Laura managed to shake her head. "She never must have," he said. "Will you promise me to burn that book now?" She nodded slowly. I'm awfully sorry, Laura," he said brokenly. "I'm not idiot enough not to see that you're suffering horribly. I suppose I have done the most blundering thing possible." He stood a moment irresolute, then turned to the door. "Good bye." Hedrick had just time to dive into the hideous little room of the multitudinous owls as Richard strode into the hall. Then, with the closing of the front door, the boy was back at his post. Laura stood leaning against the wall, the book clutched in her arms, as Richard had left her. Slowly she began to sink, her eyes wide open, and with her back against the wall, she slid down until she was sitting upon the floor. Her arms relaxed and hung limp at her sides, letting the book topple over in her lap, and she sat motionless. One of her feet protruded from her skirt, and the leaping firelight illumined it ruddily. It was a graceful foot in an old shoe which had been resoled and patched. It seemed very still, that patched shoe, as if it might stay still forever. Hedrick knew that Laura had not fainted, but he wished she would move her foot. He went away. He went into the owl room again, and stood there silently a long, long time. Then he stole back again toward the library door, but caught a glimpse of that old, motionless shoe through the doorway as he came near. Then he spied no more. He went out to the stable, and, secluding himself in his studio, sat moodily to meditate. Something was the matter. Something had gone wrong. He had thrown a bomb which he had expected to go off with a stupendous bang, leaving him, as the smoke cleared, looking down in merry triumph, stinging his fallen enemies with his humor, withering them with satire, and inquiring of them how it felt, now they were getting it. But he was decidedly untriumphant. He wished Laura had moved her foot, and that she hadn't that patch upon her shoe. He could not get his mind off that patch. He began to feel very queer. It seemed to be somehow because of the patch. If she had worn a new pair of shoes that morning. Yes, it was that patch. 13 is a dangerous age. Nothing is more subtle. The boy, inspired to play the man, is beset by his own relapses into childhood, and Hedrick was near a relapse. By and by he went into the house again, to the library. Laura was not there, but he found the fire almost smothered under heaping ashes. She had burned her book. He went into the room where the piano was, and played "The Girl on the Saskatchewan" with one finger, then went out to the porch and walked up and down, whistling cheerily. After that he went upstairs and asked Miss Peirce how his father was feeling, received a noncommittal reply, looked in at Cora's room, saw that his mother was lying asleep on Cora's bed and Cora herself examining the contents of a dressing-table drawer, and he withdrew. A moment later he stood in the passage outside Laura's closed door, listening. There was no sound. He retired to his own chamber, found it unbearable, and, fascinated by Laura's, returned thither, and after standing a long time in the passage, knocked softly on the door. "Laura," he called, in a rough and careless voice, "it's kind of a pretty day outdoors. If you've had your nap, if I was you I'd go out for a walk." There was no response. "I'll go with you," he added, "if you want me to." He listened again and heard nothing. Then he turned the knob softly. The door was unlocked. He opened it and went in. Laura was sitting in a chair, with her back to a window, her hands in her lap. She was staring straight in front of her. He came near her hesitatingly, and at first she did not seem to see him or even to know that she was not alone in the room. Then she looked at him wonderingly, and, as he stood beside her, lifted her right hand and set it gently upon his head. "Hedrick," she said, "was it you that took my book to—" All at once he fell upon his knees, hid his face in her lap, and burst into loud and passionate sobbing. End of chapter 19. Chapter 20 of The Flirt, by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Valentine Corliss, having breakfasted in bed at a late hour that morning, dozed again, roused himself, and, making a toilet, addressed to the image in his shaving mirror a disgusted monosyllable: "Ass." However, he had not the look of a man who had played cards all night to a disastrous tune with an accompaniment in Scotch. His was a surface not easily indented. He was hard and healthy, clear-skinned and clear-eyed. When he had made himself point device, he went into the parlor of his apartment, frowning at the litter of malodorous relics, stumps and stubs and bottles and half-drained glasses, scattered chips and cards, dregs of a night session. He had been making acquaintances. He sat at the desk and wrote with a steady hand in Italian: "Most illustrious Moliterno, we live but learn little. As to myself, it appears that I learn nothing. Nothing. You will at once convey to me by cable 5,000 lire. No, add the difference in exchange so as to make it $1,000 which I shall receive, taking that sum from the 230,000 lire which I entrusted to your safe keeping by cable as the result of my enterprise in this place. I should have returned at once, content with that success, but as you know, I am a very stupid fellow, never pleased with a moderate triumph, nor with a large one, when there is a possible prospect of greater. I am compelled to believe that the greater I had in mind in this case was an illusion. My gentle diplomacy avails nothing against a small miser, for we have misers even in these States, though you will not believe it. I abandon him to his riches. From the success of my venture, I reserved $4,000 to keep by me and for my expenses, and it is humiliating to relate that all of this, except a small banknote or two, was taken from me last night by amateurs. I should keep away from cards. They hate me, and alone I can do nothing with them. Some young gentleman of the place, whose acquaintance I had made at a ball, did me the honor of this lesson at the native game of poker, at which I, though also native, am not even so expert as yourself, and, as you will admit, Antonio, my friend, you are not a good player when observed. Unaided, I was a child in their hands. It was also a painful rule that one paid for the counters upon delivery. This made me ill, but I carried it off with an air of carelessness creditable to an adopted Neapolitan. Upon receipt of the money you are to cable me, I shall leave this town and sail immediately. Come to Paris, and meet me there at the place on the Rue Auber, within 10 days from your reading this letter. You will have, remaining, 225,000 francs, which it will be safer to bring in cash, and I will deal well with you, as is our custom with each other. You have done excellently throughout, Your cables and letters for exhibition concerning those famous oil wells have been perfection, and I shall of course not deduct what was taken by these thieves of poker players from the sum of profits upon which we shall estimate your commission. I have several times had the feeling that the hour for departure had arrived. Now I shall delay not a moment after receiving your cable, though I may occupy the interim with a last attempt to interest my small miser. Various circumstances cause me some uneasiness, though I do not believe I could be successfully assailed by the law in the matter of oil. You do own an estate in Basilicata, at least your brother does. These good people here would not be apt to discover the difference, and the rest is a matter of plausibility. The odious coincidence of encountering the old cow, Pryor, fretted me somewhat, though he has not repeated his annoying call. And I have other small apprehensions, for example, that it may not improve my credit if my loss of last night becomes gossip, though the thieves professed strong habits of discretion. My little affair of gallantry grows embarrassing. Such affairs are so easy to inaugurate, extrication is more difficult. However, without it I should have failed to interest my investor, and there is always the charm. Your last letter is too curious in that matter. Licentious man, one does not write of these things while under the banner of the illustrious Uncle Sam. I am assuming the American attitude while here, or perhaps my early youth returns to me. A thing very different from your own boyhood, Don Antonio. Nevertheless, I promise you some laughter in the Rue Auber, though you will not be able to understand the half of what I shall tell you, particularly the portraits I shall sketch of my defeated rivals. Your spirit shall roll with laughter. To the bank, then, the instant you read. Cable me $1,000, and be at the Rue Auber not more than 10 days later. To the bank, thence to the telegraph office. Speed. V.C. He was in better spirits as he read over this letter, and he chuckled as he addressed it. He pictured himself in the rear room of the bar in the Rue Auber, relating, across the little marble-topped table, this American adventure, to the delight of that blithe, ne'er-do-well outcast of an exalted poor family, that gambler, blackmailer, and merry rogue, Don Antonio Moliterno, comrade and teacher of this ductile Valentine since the later days of adolescence. They had been schoolfellows in Rome, and later roamed Europe together unleashed, discovering worlds of many kinds. Valentine's careless mother let her boy go as he liked, and was often negligent in the matter of remittances. He and his friend learned ways to raise the wind, becoming expert and making curious affiliations. At her death there was a small inheritance. She had not been provident. The little she left went rocketing, and there was the wind to be raised again. Young Corliss had wits, and had found that they could supply him, most of the time, with much more than the necessities of life. He had also found that he possessed a strong attraction for various women. Already, at 22, his experience was considerable, and in his way he became a specialist. He had a talent. He improved it, and his opportunities. Altogether, he took to the work without malice and with a light heart. He sealed the envelope, rang for a boy, gave him the letter to post, and directed that the apartment should be set to rights. It was not that in which he had received Ray Vilas. Corliss had moved to rooms on another floor of the hotel, the day after that eccentric and somewhat ominous person had called to make an investment. Ray's shadowy forebodings concerning that former apartment had encountered satire. Corliss was a materialist, and, at the mildest estimate, an unusually practical man, but he would never sleep in a bed with its foot toward the door. Southern Italy had seeped into him. He changed his rooms, a measure of which Don Antonio Moliterno would have wholly approved. Besides, these were as comfortable as the others, and so like them as even to confirm Ray's statement concerning a reading from Homer. Evidently this work had been purchased by the edition. A boy came to announce that his roadster waited for him at the hotel entrance, and Corliss put on a fur motoring coat and cap, and went downstairs. A door leading from the hotel bar into the lobby was open, and as Corliss passed it, there issued a mocking shout. "Tor'dor! Oh, look at the Tor'dor! Ain't he the handsome Spaniard?" Ray Vilas stumbled out, tousled, haggard, waving his arms in absurd and meaningless gestures, an amused gallery of tipplers filling the doorway behind him. "Goin' take Carmen buggy ride in the country, ain't he? Good old Tor'dor!" he quavered loudly, clutching Corliss's shoulder. "How much you s'pose he pays for that buzz buggy by the day, gentlemen? Naughty Tor'dor, stole $1,000 from me, makin' presents, diamond cresses. Tor'dor, I hear you been playin' cards. Thass'n nice. Tor'dor, you're not a goo boy at all. You know you oughtn't waste Dick Lindley's money like that." Corliss set his open hand upon the drunkard's breast and sent him gyrating and plunging backward. Someone caught the grotesque figure as it fell. "Oh, my God!" screamed Ray. "I haven't got a gun on me. He knows I haven't got my gun with me. Why haven't I got my gun with me?" They hustled him away, and Corliss, enraged and startled, passed on. As he sped the car up Corliss Street, he decided to anticipate his letter to Moliterno by a cable. He had stayed too long. Cora looked charming in a new equipment for November motoring, yet it cannot be said that either of them enjoyed the drive. They lunched a dozen miles out from the city at an establishment somewhat in the nature of a roadside inn, and, although its cuisine was quite unknown to Cora's friend, Mrs. Villard, an eager amateur of the table, they were served with a meal of such unusual excellence that the waiter thought it a thousand pities patrons so distinguished should possess such poor appetites. They returned at about 3 in the afternoon, and Cora descended from the car wearing no very amiable expression. "Why won't you come in now?" she asked, looking at him angrily. "We've got to talk things out. We've settled nothing whatever. I want to know why you can't stop." "I've got some matters to attend to, and—" "What matters?" She shot him a glance of fierce skepticism. "Are you packing to get out?" "Cora!" he cried reproachfully. "How can you say things like that to me?" She shook her head. "Oh, it wouldn't surprise me in the least. How do I know what you'll do? For all I know, you may be just that kind of a man. You said you ought to be going—" "Cora," he explained gently, "I didn't say I meant to go. I said only that I thought I ought to, because Moliterno will be needing me in Basilicata. I ought to be there, since it appears that no more money is to be raised here. I ought to be superintending operations in the oil field, so as to make the best use of the little I have raised." "You!" she laughed. "Of course I didn't have anything to do with it." He sighed deeply. "You know perfectly well that I appreciate all you did. We don't seem to get on very well to day." "No." She laughed again, bitterly. "So you think you'll be going, don't you?" "To my rooms to write some necessary letters." "Of course, not to pack your trunk?" "Cora," he returned, goaded, "sometimes you're just impossible. I'll come to morrow forenoon." "Then don't bring the car. I'm tired of motoring and tired of lunching in that rotten hole. We can talk just as well in the library. Papa's better, and that little fiend will be in school to morrow. Come out about 10." He started the machine. "Don't forget I love you," he called in a low voice. She stood looking after him as the car dwindled down the street. "Yes, you do," she murmured. She walked up the path to the house, her face thoughtful, as with a tiresome perplexity. In her own room, divesting herself of her wraps, she gave the mirror a long scrutiny. It offered the picture of a girl with a hard and dreary air. But Cora saw something else, and presently, though the dreariness remained, the hardness softened to a great compassion. She suffered. A warm wave of sorrow submerged her, and she threw herself upon the bed and wept long and silently for herself. At last her eyes dried, and she lay staring at the ceiling. The doorbell rang, and Sarah, the cook, came to inform her that Mr. Richard Lindley was below. "Tell him I'm out." "Can't," returned Sarah. "Done told him you was home." And she departed firmly. Thus abandoned, the prostrate lady put into a few words what she felt about Sarah, and going to the door, whisperingly summoned in Laura, who was leaving the sick room across the hall. "Richard is downstairs. Will you go and tell him I'm sick in bed or dead? Anything to make him go." And assuming Laura's acquiescence, Cora went on without pause. "Is father worse? What's the matter with you, Laura?" "Nothing. He's a little better, Miss Peirce thinks." "You look ill." "I'm all right." "Then run along like a duck and get rid of that old bore for me." "Cora, please see him." "Not me. I've got too much to think about to bother with him." Laura walked to the window and stood with her back to her sister, apparently interested in the view of Corliss Street there presented. "Cora," she said, "why don't you marry him and have done with all this?" Cora hooted. "Why not? Why not marry him as soon as you can get ready? Why don't you go down now and tell him you will? Why not, Cora?" "I'd as soon marry a pail of milk. Yes, tepid milk, skimmed. I—" "Don't you realize how kind he'd be to you?" "I don't know about that," said Cora moodily. "He might object to some things, but it doesn't matter, because I'm not going to try him. I don't mind a man's being a fool, but I can't stand the absent-minded breed of idiot. I've worn his diamond in the pendant right in his eyes for weeks. He's never once noticed it enough even to ask me about the pendant, but bores me to death wanting to know why I won't wear the ring. Anyhow, what's the use of talking about him? He couldn't marry me right now, even if I wanted him to. Not till he begins to get something on the investment he made with Val. Outside of that, he's got nothing except his rooms at his mother's. She hasn't much either. And if Richard should lose what he put in with Val, he couldn't marry for years, probably. That's what made him so obstinate about it. No, if I ever marry right off the reel, it's got to be with someone with— Cora!" Laura still spoke from the window, not turning. "Aren't you tired of it all? Of this getting so upset about one man and then another and—" "Tired!" Cora uttered the word in a repressed fury of emphasis. "I'm sick of everything. I don't care for anything or anybody on this earth except you and mama. I thought I was going to love Val. I thought I did. But oh, my Lord, I don't. I don't think I can care any more. Or else there isn't any such thing as love. How can anybody tell whether there is or not? You get kind of crazy over a man and want to go the limit, or marry him perhaps, or sometimes you just want to make him crazy about you, and then you get over it, and what is there left but hell?" She choked with a sour laugh. "Ugh! For heaven's sake, Laura, don't make me talk. Everything's gone to the devil, and I've got to think. The best thing you can do is to go down and get rid of Richard for me. I can't see him." "Very well," said Laura, and went to the door. "You're a darling," whispered Cora, kissing her quickly. "Tell him I'm in a raging headache. Make him think I wanted to see him, but you wouldn't let me because I'm too ill." She laughed. "Give me a little time, old dear. I may decide to take him yet." It was Mrs. Madison who informed the waiting Richard that Cora was unable to see him because she was lying down, and the young man, after properly inquiring about Mr. Madison, went blankly forth. Hedrick was stalking the front yard, mounted at a great height upon a pair of stilts. He joined the departing visitor upon the sidewalk and honored him with his company, proceeding storkishly beside him. "Been to see Cora?" "Yes, Hedrick." "What did you want to see her about?" asked the frank youth seriously. Richard was able to smile. "Nothing in particular, Hedrick." "You didn't come to tell her about something?" "Nothing whatever, my dear sir. I wished merely the honor of seeing her and chatting with her upon indifferent subjects." "Why? Did you see her?" "No, I'm sorry to—" "She's home, all right," Hedrick took pleasure in informing him. "Yes, she was lying down and I told your mother not to disturb her." "Worn out with too much automobile riding, I expect," Hedrick sniffed. "She goes out about every day with this Corliss in his hired roadster." They walked on in silence. Not far from Mrs. Lindley's, Hedrick abruptly became vocal in an artificial laugh. Richard was obviously intended to inquire into its cause, but, as he did not, Hedrick, after laughing hollowly for some time, volunteered the explanation. "I played a pretty good trick on you last night." "Odd I didn't know it." "That's why it was good. You'd never guess it in the world." "No, I believe I shouldn't. You see what makes it so hard, Hedrick, is that I can't even remember seeing you last night." "Nobody saw me. Somebody heard me, though, all right." "Who?" "The nigger that works at your mother's, Joe." "What about it? Were you teasing Joe?" "No, it was you I was after." "Well, did you get me?" Hedrick made another somewhat ghastly pretense of mirth. "Well, I guess I've had about all the fun out of it I'm going to. Might as well tell you. It was that book of Laura's you thought she sent you." Richard stopped short. Whereupon Hedrick turned clumsily, and began to stalk back in the direction from which they had come. "That book I thought she sent me?" Lindley repeated, stammering. "She never sent it," called the boy, continuing to walk away. "She kept it hid, and I found it. I faked her into writing your name on a sheet of paper, and made you think she sent the old thing to you. I just did it for a joke on you." With too retching an effort to simulate another burst of merriment, he caught the stump of his right stilt in a pavement crack, wavered, cut in the air a figure like a geometrical proposition gone mad, and came whacking to earth in a magnificent disaster. Richard took him to Mrs. Lindley for repairs. She kept him until dark. Hedrick was bandaged, led, lemonaded, and blandished. Never in his life had he known such a listener. End of chapter 20. Chapter 21 of The Flirt, by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. That was a long night for Cora Madison, and the morning found her yellow. She made a poor breakfast, and returned from the table to her own room, but after a time descended restlessly and wandered from one room to another, staring out of the windows. Laura had gone out. Mrs. Madison was with her husband, whom she seldom left. Hedrick had departed ostensibly for school, and the house was as still as a farm in winter. An intolerable condition of things for an effervescent young woman whose diet was excitement. Cora, drumming with her fingers upon a window in the owl-haunted cell, made noises with her throat, her breath and her lips not unsuggestive of a sputtering fuse. She was heavily charged. "Now, what in thunder do you want?" she inquired of an elderly man who turned in from the sidewalk and with serious steps approached the house. Pryor, having rung, found himself confronted with the lady he had come to seek. Ensued the moment of strangers meeting, invisible antennae extended and touched. At the contact, Cora's drew in, and she looked upon him without graciousness. "I just called," he said placatively, smiling as if some humor lurked in his intention, "to ask how your father is. I heard downtown he wasn't getting along quite so well." "He's better this morning, thanks," said Cora, preparing to close the door. "I thought I'd just stop and ask about him. I heard he'd had another bad spell kind of a second stroke." "That was night before last. The doctor thinks he's improved very much since then." The door was closing. He coughed hastily, and detained it by speaking again. "I've called several times to inquire about him, but I believe it's the first time I've had the pleasure of speaking to you, Miss Madison. I'm Mr. Pryor." She appeared to find no comment necessary, and he continued: "Your father did a little business for me several years ago, and when I was here on my vacation, this summer, I was mighty sorry to hear of his sickness. I've had a nice bit of luck lately and got a second furlough, so I came out to spend a couple of weeks and Thanksgiving with my married daughter." Cora supposed that it must be very pleasant. "Yes," he returned, "but I was mighty sorry to hear your father wasn't much better than when I left. The truth is, I wanted to have a talk with him, and I've been reproaching myself a good deal that I didn't go ahead with it last summer when he was well, only I thought then it mightn't be necessary, might be disturbing things without much reason." "I'm afraid you can't have a talk with him now," she said. "The doctor says—" "I know," said Pryor. "Of course. I wonder—" he hesitated, smiling faintly, "I wonder if I could have it with you instead." "Me?" "Oh, it isn't business," he laughed, observing her expression. "That is, not exactly." His manner became very serious. "It's about a friend of mine. At least, a man I know pretty well. Miss Madison, I saw you driving out through the park with him, yesterday noon, in an automobile. Valentine Corliss." Cora stared at him. Honesty, friendliness, and grave concern were disclosed to her scrutiny. There was no mistaking him. He was a good man. Her mouth opened, and her eyelids flickered as from a too sudden invasion of light, the look of one perceiving the close approach of a vital crisis. But there was no surprise in her face. "Come in," she said. When Corliss arrived, at about 11 o'clock that morning, Sarah brought him to the library, where he found Cora waiting for him. He had the air of a man determined to be cheerful under adverse conditions. He came in briskly, and Cora closed the door behind him. "Keep away from me," she said, pushing him back sharply the next instant. "I've had enough of that for a while, I believe." He sank into a chair, affecting desolation. "Caresses blighted in the bud. Cora, one would think us really married." She walked across the floor to a window, turned there, with her back to the light, and stood facing him, her arms folded. "Good heavens!" he exclaimed, noting this attitude. "Is it the trial scene from a faded melodrama?" She looked steadily at him without replying. "What's it all about to day?" he asked lightly. "I'll try to give you the proper cues if you'll indicate the general nature of the scene, Cora mine." She continued to look at him in silence. "It's very effective," he observed. "Brings out the figure, too. Do forgive me if you're serious, dear lady, but never in my life was I able to take the folded arms business seriously. It was used on the stage of all countries so much that I believe most new school actors have dropped it. They think it lacks genuineness." Cora waited a moment longer, then spoke. "How much chance have I got to get Richard Lindley's money back from you?" He was astounded. "Oh, I say!" "I had a caller this morning," she said slowly. "He talked about you quite a lot. He's told me several things about you." "Mr. Vilas?" he asked, with a sting in his quick smile. "No," she answered coolly. "Much older." At that he jumped up, stepped quickly close to her, and swept her with an intense and brilliant scrutiny. "Pryor, by God!" he cried. "He knows you pretty well," she said. "So do I, now." He swung away from her, back to his chair, dropped into it, and began to laugh. "Old Pryor! Doddering old Pryor! Doddering old ass of a Pryor! So he did! Blood of an angel! What a stew! What a stew!" He rose again, mirthless. "Well, what did he say?" She had begun to tremble, not with fear. "He said a good deal." "Well, what was it? What did he tell you?" "I think you'll find it plenty." "Come on." "You." She pointed at him. "Let's have it." "He told me," she burst out furiously, "he said you were a professional sharper." "Oh, no, old Pryor doesn't talk like that." She came toward him. "He told me you were notorious over half of Europe. she cried vehemently. He said he'd arrested you himself once, in Rotterdam, for smuggling jewels, and that you were guilty, but managed to squirm out of it. He said the police had put you out of Germany and you'd be arrested if you ever tried to go back. He said there were other places you didn't dare set foot in, and he said he could have you arrested in this country any time he wanted to, and that he was going to do it if he found you'd been doing anything wrong. Oh, yes, he told me a few things." He caught her by the shoulder. "See here, Cora, do you believe all this tommyrot?" She shook his hand off instantly. "Believe it? I know it! There isn't a straight line in your whole soul and mind. You're crooked all over. You've been crooked with me from the start. The moment that man began to speak I knew every word of it was true. He came to me because he thought it was right. He hasn't anything against you on his own account. He said he liked you. I knew it was true, I tell you." He tried to put his hand on her shoulder again, beginning to speak remonstratingly, but she cried out in a rage, broke away from him, and ran to the other end of the room. "Keep away! Do you suppose I like you to touch me? He told me you always had been a wonder with women. Said you were famous for handling them the right way, using them. Ah, that was pleasant information for me, wasn't it? Yes, I could have confirmed him on that point. He wanted to know if I thought you'd been doing anything of that sort here. What he meant was, had you been using me?" "What did you tell him?" The question rang sharply on the instant. "Ha! That gets into you, doesn't it?" she returned bitterly. "You can't overdo your fear of that man, I think, but I didn't tell him anything. I just listened and thanked him for the warning, and said I'd have nothing more to do with you. How could I tell him? Wasn't it I that made papa lend you his name, and got Richard to hand over his money? Where does that put me?" She choked. Sobs broke her voice. Every soul in town would point me out as a laughing stock, the easiest fool out of the asylum. Do you suppose I want you arrested and the whole thing in the papers? What I want is Richard's money back, and I'm going to have it." "Can you be quiet for a moment and listen?" he asked gravely. "If you'll tell me what chance I have to get it back." "Cora," he said, "you don't want it back." "Oh, don't I?" "No." He smiled faintly and went on. "Now, all this nonsense of old Pryor's isn't worth denying. I have met him abroad. That much is true. And I suppose I have rather a gay reputation." She uttered a jeering sound. "Wait," he said. "I told you I'd cut quite a swath when I first talked to you about myself. Let it go for the present and come down to this question of Lindley's investment." "Yes, that's what I want you to come down to." "As soon as Lindley paid in his check, I gave him his stock certificates and cabled the money to be used at once in the development of the oil fields." "What? That man told me you'd promoted a South American rubber company once, among people of the American colony in Paris. The details he gave me sounded strangely familiar." "You'd as well be patient, Cora. Now, that money has probably been partially spent, by this time, on tools and labor and—" "What are you trying to—" "I'll show you. But first I'd like you to understand that nothing can be done to me. There's nothing on me. I've acted in good faith, and if the venture in oil is unsuccessful and the money lost, I can't be held legally responsible, nor can anyone prove that I am. I could bring 40 witnesses from Naples to swear they have helped to bore the wells. I'm safe as your stubborn friend Mr. Trumble himself. But now then, suppose that old Pryor is right, as of course he isn't. Suppose it, merely for a moment, because it will aid me to convey something to your mind. If I were the kind of man he says I am, and, being such a man, had planted the money out of reach, for my own use, what on earth would induce me to give it back?" "I knew it!" she groaned. "I knew you wouldn't." "You see," he said quietly, "it would be impossible. We must go on supposing for a moment. If I had put that money away, I might be contemplating a departure." "You'd better!" she cried fiercely. "He's going to find out everything you've been doing. He said so. He heard a rumor that you were trying to raise money here. He told me so, and said he'd soon—" "The better reason for not delaying, perhaps. Cora, see here." He moved nearer her. "Wouldn't I need a lot of money if I expected to have a beautiful lady to care for, and—" "You idiot!" she screamed. "Do you think I'm going with you?" He flushed heavily. "Well, aren't you?" He paused to stare at her, as she wrung her hands and sobbed with hysterical laughter. "I thought," he went on slowly, "that you would possibly even insist on that." "Oh, Lord, Lord, Lord!" She stamped her foot, and with both hands threw the tears from her eyes in wide and furious gestures. "He told me you were married." "Did you let him think you hadn't known that?" demanded Corliss. "I tell you I didn't let him think anything. He said you would never be able to get a divorce, that your wife hates you too much to get one from you, and that she'll never—" "See here, Cora," he said harshly. "I told you I've been married. I told you before I ever kissed you. You understood perfectly." "I did not. You said you had been. You laughed about it. You made me think it was something that had happened a long time ago. I thought of course you'd been divorced." "But I told you—" "You told me after. And then you made me think you could easily get one, that it was only a matter of form and—" "Cora," he interrupted, "you're the most elaborate little self-deceiver I ever knew. I don't believe you've ever faced yourself for an honest moment in—" "Honest? You talk to me about honest? You use that word and face me?" He came closer, meeting her distraught eyes squarely. "You love to fool yourself, Cora, but the role of betrayed virtue doesn't suit you very well. You're young, but you're a pretty experienced woman for all that, and you haven't done anything you didn't want to. You've had both eyes open every minute, and we both know it. You are just as wise as—" "You're lying and you know it. What did I want to make Richard go into your scheme for? You made a fool of me." "I'm not speaking of the money now," he returned quickly. "You'd better keep your mind on the subject. Are you coming away with me?" "What for?" she asked. "What for?" he echoed incredulously. "I want to know if you're coming. I promise you I'll get a divorce as soon as it's possible." "Val," she said, in a tone lower than she had used since he entered the room. "Val, do you want me to come?" "Yes." "Much?" She looked at him eagerly. "Yes, I do." His answer sounded quite genuine. "Will it hurt you if I don't?" "Of course it will." "Thank heaven for that," she said quietly. "You honestly mean you won't?" "It makes me sick with laughing just to imagine it. I've done some hard little thinking lately, my friend, particularly last night, and still more particularly this morning since that man was here. I'd cut my throat before I'd go with you. If you had your divorce I wouldn't marry you, not if you were the last man on earth." "Cora!" he cried, aghast. "What's the matter with you? You're too many for me sometimes. I thought I understood a few kinds of women. Now listen. I've offered to take you, and you can't say—" "Offered!" It was she who came toward him now. She came swiftly, shaking with rage, and struck him upon the breast. "Offered! Do you think I want to go trailing around Europe with you while Dick Lindley's money lasts? What kind of a life are you offering me? Do you suppose I'm going to have everybody saying Cora Madison ran away with a jailbird? Do you think I'm going to dodge decent people in hotels and steamers and leave a name in this town that— Oh, get out! I don't want any help from you. I can take care of myself, I tell you, and I don't have to marry you. I'd kill you if I could. You made a fool of me." Her voice rose shrilly. "You made a fool of me." "Cora," he began, imploringly. "You made a fool of me." She struck him again. "Strike me," he said. "I love you." "Actor!" "Cora, I want you. I want you more than I ever—" She screamed with hysterical laughter. "Liar, liar, liar! The same old guff! Don't you even see it's too late for the old rotten tricks?" "Cora, I want you to come." "You poor conceited fool!" she cried. "Do you think you're the only man I can marry?" "Cora!" he gasped. "You wouldn't do that?" "Oh, get out! Get out now! I'm tired of you. I never want to hear you speak again." "Cora," he begged, "for the last time." "No! You made a fool of me!" She beat him upon the breast, striking again and again, with all her strength. "Get out, I tell you! I'm through with you!" He tried to make her listen, to hold her wrists. He could do neither. "Get out! Get out!" she screamed. She pushed and dragged him toward the door, and threw it open. Her voice thickened. She choked and coughed, but kept on screaming. "Get out, I tell you! Get out! Get out, damn you! Damn you! Damn you! Get out!" Still continuing to strike him with all her strength, she forced him out of the door. End of chapter 21. Chapter 22 of The Flirt, by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Cora lost no time. Corliss had not closed the front door behind him before she was running up the stairs. Mrs. Madison, emerging from her husband's room, did not see her daughter's face, for Cora passed her quickly, looking the other way. "Was anything the matter?" asked the mother, anxiously. "I thought I heard—" "Nothing in the world," Cora flung back over her shoulder. "Mr. Corliss said I couldn't imitate Sarah Bernhardt, and I showed him I could." She began to hum, left a fragment of ragtime floating behind her as she entered her own room; and Mrs. Madison, relieved, returned to the invalid. Cora changed her clothes quickly. She put on a pale gray skirt and coat for the street, high shoes and a black velvet hat, very simple. The costume was almost startlingly becoming to her. Never in her life had she looked prettier. She opened her small jewel case, slipped all her rings upon her fingers, then put the diamond crescent, the pendant, her watch, and 3 or 4 other things into the flat, envelope-shaped bag of soft leather she carried when shopping. After that she brought from her clothes pantry a small traveling bag and packed it hurriedly. Laura, returning from errands downtown and glancing up at Cora's window, perceived an urgently beckoning, gray-gloved hand and came at once to her sister's room. The packed bag upon the bed first caught her eye, then Cora's attire and the excited expression of Cora's face, which was high-flushed and moist, glowing with a great resolve. "What's happened?" asked Laura quickly. "You look exactly like a going-away bride. What—" Cora spoke rapidly. "Laura, I want you to take this bag and keep it in your room till a messenger boy comes for it. When the bell rings, go to the door yourself and hand it to him. Don't give Hedrick a chance to go to the door. Just give it to the boy, and don't say anything to mamma about it. I'm going downtown and I may not be back." Laura began to be frightened. "What is it you want to do, Cora?" she asked, trembling. Cora was swift and businesslike. "See here, Laura, I've got to keep my head about me. You can do a great deal for me if you won't be emotional just now and help me not to be. I can't afford it, because I've got to do things, and I'm going to do them just as quickly as I can and get it over. If I wait any longer I'll go insane. I can't wait. You've been a wonderful sister to me. I've always counted on you, and you've never once gone back on me. Right now I need you to help me more than I ever have in my life. Will you—" "But I must know." "No, you needn't. I'll tell you this much. I've got myself in a devil of a mess." Laura threw her arms round her. "Oh, my dear, dear little sister," she cried. But Cora drew away. "Now that's just what you mustn't do. I can't stand it. You've got to be quiet. I can't—" Yes, yes, Laura said hurriedly. I will. I'll do whatever you say. It's perfectly simple. All I want you to do is take charge of my traveling bag, and, when a messenger boy comes, give it to him without letting anybody know anything about it. But I've got to know where you're going. I can't let you go and not. Yes, you can. Besides, you've promised to. I'm not going to do anything foolish. Then why not tell me? Laura began. She went on, imploring Cora to confide in her, entreating her to see their mother, to do a dozen things altogether outside of Cora's plans. "You're wasting your breath, Laura," said the younger sister, interrupting, "and wasting my time. You're in the dark. You think I'm going to run away with Val Corliss, and you're wrong. I sent him out of the house for good, a while ago." "Thank heaven for that!" cried Laura. "I'm going to take care of myself," Cora went on rapidly. "I'm going to get out of the mess I'm in, and you've got to let me do it my own way. I'll send you a note from downtown. You see that the messenger—" She was at the door, but Laura caught her by the sleeve, protesting and beseeching. Cora turned desperately. "See here, I'll come back in 2 hours and tell you all about it. If I promise that, will you promise to send me the bag by the—" "But if you're coming back you won't need—" Cora spoke very quietly. "I'll go to pieces in a moment. Really, I do think I'd better jump out of the window and have it over." "I'll send the bag," Laura quavered, "if you'll promise to come back in 2 hours." "I promise." Cora gave her a quick embrace, a quick kiss, and, dry-eyed, ran out of the room, down the stairs and out of the house. She walked briskly down Corliss Street. It was a clear day, bright noon, with an exhilarating tang in the air, and a sky so glorious that people outdoors were continually conscious of the blue overhead, and looked up at it often. An autumnal cheerfulness was abroad, and pedestrians showed it in their quickened steps, in their enlivened eyes and frequent smiles, and in the color of their faces. But none showed more color or a gayer look than Cora. She encountered many whom she knew, for it was indeed a day to be stirring, and she nodded and smiled her way all down the long street, thinking of what these greeted people would say tomorrow. "I saw her yesterday walking down Corliss Street, about noon, in a gray suit and looking fairly radiant." Some of those she met were enemies she had chastened. She prophesied their remarks with accuracy. Some were old suitors, men who had desired her. One or two had place upon her long list of boy sweethearts. She gave the same gay, friendly nod to each of them, and foretold his morrow's thoughts of her, in turn. Her greeting of Mary Kay was graver, as was aesthetically appropriate, Mr. Watling's engagement having been broken by that lady immediately after his drive to the country club for tea. Cora received from the beautiful jilt a salutation even graver than her own, which did not confound her. Halfway down the street was a drug store. She went in and obtained an appreciative permission to use the telephone. She came out well satisfied, and went swiftly on her way. 10 minutes later she opened the door of Wade Trumble's office. He was alone. Her telephone had caught him in the act of departing for lunch, but he had been glad to wait, glad to the verge of agitation. "By George, Cora!" he exclaimed as she came quickly in and closed the door. "But you can look stunning. Believe me, that's some get-up. But let me tell you right here and now, before you begin, it's no use your tackling me again on the oil proposition. If there was any chance of my going into it which there wasn't, not one on earth, why, the very fact of your asking me would have stopped me. I'm no Dick Lindley, I beg to inform you. I don't spend my money helping a girl that I want, myself, to make a hit with another man. You treated me like a dog about that, right in the street, and you needn't try it again, because I won't stand for it. You can't play me, Cora." "Wade," she said, coming closer and looking at him mysteriously, "didn't you tell me to come to you when I got through playing?" "What?" He grew very red, took a step back from her, staring at her distrustfully, incredulously. "I've got through playing," she said in a low voice, "and I've come to you." He was staggered. "You've come?" he said huskily. "Here I am, Wade." He had flushed, but now the color left his small face, and he grew very white. "I don't believe you mean it." "Listen," she said. "I was rotten to you about that oil nonsense. It was nonsense nothing on earth but nonsense. I tell you frankly I was a fool. I didn't care the snap of my finger for Corliss, but oh, what's the use of pretending? You were always such a great business man, always so absorbed in business, and put it before everything else in the world. You cared for me, but you cared for business more than for me. Well, no woman likes that, Wade. I've come to tell you the whole thing. I can't stand it any longer. I suffered horribly because, she faltered. Wade, that was no way to win a girl." "Cora!" His incredulity was strong. "I thought I hated you for it, Wade. Yes, I did think that. I'm telling you everything, you see just blurting it out as it comes, Wade. Well, Corliss asked me to help him, and it struck me I'd show that I could understand a business deal, myself. Wade, this is pretty hard to say, I was such a little fool, but you ought to know it. You've got a right to know it, Wade. I thought if I put through a thing like that, it would make a tremendous hit with you, and that then I could say, 'So this is the kind of thing you put ahead of me, is it?' Simple little things like this that I can do, myself, by turning over my little finger. So I got Richard to go in. That was easy. And then it struck me that the crowning triumph of the whole thing would be to get you to come in yourself. That would be showing you, I thought. But you wouldn't. You put me in my place, and I was angry. I never was so angry in my life, and I showed it." Tears came into her voice. "Oh, Wade," she said softly, "it was the very wildness of my anger that showed what I really felt." About me?" His incredulity struggled with his hope. He stepped close to her. "What an awful fool I've been," she sighed. "Why, I thought I could show you I was your equal. And look what it's got me into, Wade." "What has it got you into, Cora?" "One thing worth while. I can see what I really am when I try to meet you on your own ground." She bent her head, humbly, then lifted it and spoke rapidly. "All the rest is dreadful, Wade. I had a distrust of Corliss from the first. I didn't like him, but I took him up because I thought he offered the chance to show you what I could do. Well, it's got me into a most horrible mess. He's a swindler, a rank—" "By George!" Wade shouted. "Cora, you're talking out now like a real woman." "Listen, I got horribly tired of him after a week or so, but I'd promised to help him and I didn't break with him. But yesterday I just couldn't stand him any longer, and I told him so, and sent him away. Then, this morning, an old man came to the house, a man named Pryor, who knew him and knew his record, and he told me all about him." She narrated the interview. "But you had sent Corliss away first?" Wade asked sharply. "Yesterday, I tell you." She set her hand on the little man's shoulder. "Wade, there's bound to be a scandal over all this. Even if Corliss gets away without being arrested and tried, the whole thing's bound to come out. I'll be the laughing stock of the town, and I deserve to be. It's all through having been ridiculous idiot enough to try and impress you with my business brilliancy. Well, I can't stand it." "Cora, do you—" he faltered. She leaned toward him, her hand still on his shoulder, her exquisite voice lowered, and thrilling in its sweetness. "Wade, I'm through playing. I've come to you at last because you've utterly conquered me. If you'll take me away today, I'll marry you today." He gave a shout that rang again from the walls. "Do you want me?" she whispered, then smiled upon his rapture indulgently. Rapture it was. With the word marry, his incredulity sped forever. But for a time he was incoherent. He leaped and hopped, spoke broken bits of words, danced fragmentarily, ate her with his eyes, partially embraced her, and finally kissed her timidly. "Such a wedding we'll have!" he shouted after that. "No," she said sharply. "We'll be married by a justice of the peace, and not a soul there but us, and it will be now or it never will be. If you don't—" He swore she should have her way. "Then we'll be out of this town on the 3 o'clock train this afternoon," she said. She went on with her plans, while he, growing more accustomed to his privilege, caressed her as he would. "You shall have your way," she said, "in everything except the wedding journey. That's got to be a long one. I won't come back here till people have forgotten all about this Corliss mix-up. I've never been abroad, and I want you to take me. We can stay a long, long time. I've brought nothing. We'll get whatever we want in New York before we sail." He agreed to everything. He had never really hoped to win her. Paradise had opened, dazing him with glory. He was astounded, mad with joy, and abjectly his lady's servant. "Hadn't you better run along and get the license?" she laughed. "We'll have to be married on the way to the train." "Cora!" he gasped. "You angel!" "I'll wait here for you," she smiled. "There won't be too much time." He obtained a moderate control of his voice and feet. "Enfield, that's my cashier. He'll be back from his lunch at 1:30. Tell him about us, if I'm not here by then. Tell him he's got to manage somehow. Good bye till I come back, Mrs. Trumbull." At the door he turned. "Oh, have you—" He paused uncertainly. "Have you sent Richard Lindley any word about—" "Wade!" She gave his inquiry an indulgent amusement. "If I'm not worried about him, do you think you need to?" "I meant about—" "You funny thing," she said. "I never had any idea of really marrying him. It wasn't anything but one of those silly half engagements, and—" "I didn't mean that," he said apologetically. "I meant about letting him know what this Pryor told you about Corliss, so that Richard might do something toward getting his money back. We ought to—" "Oh, yes," she said quickly. "Yes, that's all right." "You saw Richard?" "No, I sent him a note. He knows all about it by this time, if he has been home this morning. You'd better start, Wade. Send a messenger to our house for my bag. Tell him to bring it here and then take a note for me. You'd really better start, dear." "Cora!" he shouted, took her in his arms, and was gone. His departing gait down the corridor to the elevator seemed, from the sounds, to be a gallop. Left alone, Cora wrote, sealed, and directed a note to Laura. In it she recounted what Pryor had told her of Corliss; begged Laura and her parents not to think her heartless in not preparing them for this abrupt marriage. She was in such a state of nervousness, she wrote, that explanations would have caused a breakdown. The marriage was a sensible one. She had long contemplated it as a possibility, and, after thinking it over thoroughly, she had decided it was the only thing to do. She sent her undying love. She was sitting with this note in her hand when shuffling footsteps sounded in the corridor. Either Wade's cashier or the messenger, she supposed. The doorknob turned, a husky voice asking, "Want a drink?" as the door opened. Cora was not surprised. She knew Vilas's office was across the hall from that in which she waited. But she was frightened. Ray stood blinking at her. "What are you doing here?" he asked at last. Chapter 23 of The Flirt, by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. It is probable that he got the truth out of her, perhaps all of it. That will remain a matter of doubt. Cora's evidence, if she gave it, not being wholly trustworthy in cases touching herself. But she felt no need of mentioning to anyone that she had seen her former lover that day. He had gone before the return of Enfield, Mr. Trumbull's assistant, who was a little later than usual, it happened; and the extreme nervousness and preoccupation exhibited by Cora in telling Enfield of his employer's new plans were attributed by the cashier to the natural agitation of a lady about to wed in a somewhat unusual, though sensible, manner. It is the more probable that she told Ray the whole truth, because he already knew something of Corliss's record abroad. On the dusty desk in Ray's own office lay a letter, received that morning from the American consul at Naples, which was luminous upon that subject and upon the probabilities of financial returns for the investment of $1,000 in the alleged oil fields of Basilicata. In addition, Cora had always found it very difficult to deceive Vilas. He had an almost perfect understanding of a part of her nature. She could never far mislead him about herself. With her, he was intuitive and jumped to strange, inconsistent, true conclusions, as women do. He had the art of reading her face, her gestures. He had learned to listen to the tone of her voice more than to what she said. In his cups, too, he had fitful but almost demoniac inspirations for hidden truth. And, remembering that Cora always "got even," it remains finally to wonder if she might not have told him everything, at the instance of some shadowy impulse in that direction. There may have been a luxury in whatever confession she made; perhaps it was not entirely forced from her, and heaven knows how she may have colored it. There was an elusive quiet satisfaction somewhere in her subsequent expression. It lurked deep under the surface of the excitement with which she talked to Enfield of her imminent marital abduction of his small boss. Her agitation, a relic of the unknown interview just past, simmered down soon, leaving her in a becoming glow of color, with slender threads of moisture brilliantly outlining her eyelids. Mr. Enfield, a young, well-favored and recent importation from another town, was deliciously impressed by the charm of the waiting lady. They had not met, and Enfield wondered how Trumble had compassed such an enormous success as this; and he wished that he had seen her before matters had gone so far. He thought he might have had a chance. She seemed pleasantly interested in him, even as it was, and her eyes were wonderful, with their swift, warm, direct little plunges into those of a chance comrade of the moment. She went to the window, in her restlessness, looking down upon the swarming street below, and the young man, standing beside her, felt her shoulder, most pleasantly though very lightly, in contact with his own, as they leaned forward, the better to see some curiosity of advertising that passed. She turned her face to his just then, and told him that he must come to see her. The wedding journey would be long, she said, but it would not be forever. Trumble bounded in, shouting that everything was attended to, except instructions to Enfield, whom he pounded wildly upon the back. He began signing papers. A stenographer was called from another room of his offices, and there was half an hour of rapid fire. Cora's bag came, and she gave the bearer the note for Laura. Another bag was brought for Wade, and both bags were carried down to the automobile the bridegroom had left waiting in the street. Last came a splendid cluster of orchids for the bride to wear, and then Wade, with his arm about her, swept her into the corridor, and the stirred Enfield was left to his own beating heart, and the fresh, radiant vision of this startling new acquaintance, the sweet mystery of the look she had thrown back at him over his employer's shoulder at the very last. "Do not forget me," it had seemed to say. "We shall come back some day." The closed car bore the pair to the little grim marriage shop quickly enough, though they were nearly run down by a furious police patrol automobile at a corner near the Richfield Hotel. Their escape was by a very narrow margin of safety, and Cora closed her eyes. Then she was cross, because she had been frightened, and commanded Wade cavalierly to bid the driver be more careful. Wade obeyed sympathetically. Of course, though it wasn't altogether his fault, he said, settling back, his arm round his lady's waist. It's an outrage for the police to break their own rules that way. I guess they don't need to be in a hurry any more than we do." The justice made short work of it. As they stood so briefly before him, there swept across her vision the memory of what she had always prophesied as her wedding: a crowded church, the light that breathed o'er Eden from an unseen singer, then the warm air trembling to the Lohengrin march, all heads turning, the procession down the aisle, herself appearing, climax of everything, a delicious and brilliant figure, graceful, rosy, shy, an imperial prize for the groom, who in these foreshadowings had always been very indistinct. The picture had always failed in outline there. The bridegroom's nearest approach to definition had never been clearer than a composite photograph. The truth is, Cora never in her life wished to be married. But she was. End of chapter 23. Chapter 24 of The Flirt, by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Valentine Corliss had nothing to do but to wait for the money his friend Antonio would send him by cable. His own cable, anticipating his letter, had been sent yesterday, when he came back to the hotel, after lunching in the country with Cora. As he walked down Corliss Street, after his tumultuous interview with her, he was surprised to find himself physically tremulous. He had not supposed that an encounter, however violent, with an angry woman could so upset his nerves. It was no fear of Pryor which shook him. He knew that Pryor did not mean to cause his arrest, certainly not immediately. Of course, Pryor knew that Cora would tell him. The old fellow's move was a final notification. It meant, get out of town within 24 hours. And Corliss intended to obey. He would have left that evening, indeed without the warning. His trunk was packed. He would miss Cora. He had kept a cool head throughout their affair until the last. But this morning she had fascinated him, and he found himself passionately admiring the fury of her. She had confused him as he had never been confused. He thought he had tamed her, thought he owned her, and the discovery of this mistake was what made him regret that she would not come away with him. Such a flight, until today, had been one of his apprehensions. But now the thought that it was not to be brought something like pain. At least, he felt a vacancy, had a sense of something lacking. She would have been a bright comrade for the voyage, and he thought of gestures of hers, turns of the head, tricks of the lovely voice, and sighed. Of course, it was best for him that he could return to his old trails alone and free. He saw that. Cora would have been a complication and an embarrassment without predictable end, but she would have been a rare flame for a while. He wondered what she meant to do. Of course she had a plan. Should he try again? Give her another chance? No, there was one point upon which she had not mystified him. He knew she really hated him. The wind was against the smoke that day, and his spirits rose as he walked in the brisk air with the rich sky above him. After all, this venture upon his native purlieu had been far from fruitless. He could not have expected to do much better. He had made his coup. He knew no other who could have done it. It was a handsome bit of work, in fact, and possible only to a talented native thoroughly sophisticated in certain foreign subtleties. He knew himself for a rare combination. He had a glimmer of Richard Lindley beginning at the beginning again, to build a modest fortune. It was the sort of thing the Richard Lindleys were made for. Corliss was not troubled. Richard had disliked him as a boy, did not like him now. But Corliss had not taken his money out of malice for that. The adventurer was not revengeful. He was merely impervious. At the hotel, he learned that Moliterno's cable had not yet arrived. But he went to an agency of one of the steamship lines and reserved his passage, and to a railway ticket office and secured a compartment for himself on an evening train. Then he returned to his room in the hotel. The mirror over the mantelpiece, in the front room of his suite, showed him a fine figure of a man. hale, deep-chested, handsome, straight and cheerful. He nodded to it. "Well, old top," he said, reviewing and summing up his whole campaign, "not so bad, not so bad, all in all, not so bad, old top. Well played, indeed." At a sound of footsteps approaching his door, he turned in casual expectancy, thinking it might be a boy to notify him that Moliterno's cable had arrived. But there was no knock, and the door was flung wide open. It was Vilas, and he had his gun with him this time. He had two. There was a shallow clothes closet in the wall near the fireplace, and Corliss ran in there, but Vilas began to shoot through the door. Mutilated, already a dead man, and knowing it, Corliss came out, and tried to run into the bedroom. It was no use. Ray saved his last shot for himself. It did the work. End of chapter 24. Chapter 25 of The Flirt by Booth Tarkington. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. There is a song of parting, an intentionally pathetic song, which contains the line, "All the tomorrows shall be as today," meaning equally gloomy. Young singers, loving this line, take care to pronounce the words with unusual distinctness. The listener may feel that the performer has the capacity for great and consistent suffering. It is not, of course, that youth loves unhappiness, but the appearance of it, its supposed picturesqueness. Youth runs from what is pathetic, but hangs fondly upon pathos. It is the idea of sorrow, not sorrow, which charms. And so the young singer dwells upon those lingering tomorrows, happy in the conception of a permanent wretchedness incurred in the interest of sentiment. For youth believes in permanence. It is when we are young that we say, "I shall never," and "I shall always," not knowing that we are only time's atoms in a crucible of incredible change. An old man scarce dares say, "I have never," for he knows that if he searches he will find, probably, that he has. All is change. It was an evening during the winter holidays when Mrs. Linley, coming to sit by the fire in her son's smoking room, where Richard sat glooming, narrated her legend of the Devil of Lisieux. It must have been her legend. The people of Lisieux know nothing of it. But this Richard the Guileless took it for tradition, as she alleged it, and had no suspicion that she had spent the afternoon inventing it. She did not begin the recital immediately upon taking her chair, across the hearth from her son. She led up to it. She was an ample, fresh-colored, lively woman, and like her son only in being a kind soul. He got neither his mortal seriousness nor his dreaminess from her. She was more than content with Cora's abandonment of him, though, as chivalrousness was not demanded of her, she would have preferred that he should have been the jilt. She thought Richard well off in his release, even at the price of all his savings. But there was something to hope, even in that matter, Pryor wrote from Paris encouragingly. He believed that Moliterno might be frightened or forced into at least a partial restitution. Though Richard would not count upon it, and had "begun at the beginning" again, as a small salaried clerk in a bank, trudging patiently to work in the morning and home in the evening, a long-faced, tired young man, more absent than ever, lifeless, and with no interest in anything outside his own broodings. His mother, pleased with his misfortune in love, was of course troubled that it should cause him to suffer. She knew she could not heal him, but she also knew that everything is healed in time, and that sometimes it is possible for people to help time a little. Her first remark to her son this evening was that to the best of her memory she had never used the word hellion. And upon his saying gently, no, he thought it probable that she never had, but seeking no farther and dropping his eyes to the burning wood, apparently under the impression that the subject was closed, she informed him brusquely that it was her intention to say it now. "What is it you want to say, mother?" "If I can bring myself to use the word hellion," she returned, "I'm going to say that of all the heaven-born, whole-souled, and consistent ones I ever knew, Hedrick Madison is the king." "In what new way?" he inquired. "Egerton Villard. Egerton used to be the neatest, best mannered, best dressed boy in town, but he looks and behaves like a Digger Indian since he's taken to following Hedrick around. Mrs. Villard says it's the greatest sorrow of her life, but she's quite powerless. The boy is Hedrick's slave. The other day she sent a servant after him, and just bringing him home nearly ruined her limousine. He was solidly covered with molasses, over his clothes and all, from head to foot, and then he rolled in hay and chicken feathers to be a gnu for Hedrick to kodak in the African wilds of the Madisons' stable. Egerton didn't know what a gnu was, but Hedrick told him that was the way to be one, he said. Then, when they'd got him scraped and boiled, and most of his hair pulled out, a policeman came to arrest him for stealing the jug of molasses at a corner grocery." Richard nodded, and smiled faintly for comment. They sat in silence for a while. "I saw Mrs. Madison yesterday," said his mother. "She seemed very cheerful. Her husband is able to talk almost perfectly again, though he doesn't get downstairs. Laura reads to him a great deal." He nodded again, his gaze not moving from the fire. "Laura was with her mother," said Mrs. Lindley. "She looked very fetching in a black cloth suit and a fur hat old ones her sister left, I suspect, but very becoming, for all that. Laura's going out more than usual this winter. She's really the belle of the holiday dances, I hear. Of course she would be," she added thoughtfully, "now." "Why should she be now more than before?" "Oh, Laura's quite blossomed," Mrs. Lindley answered. "I think she's had some great anxieties relieved. Of course, both she and her mother must have worried about Cora as much as they waited on her. It must be a great burden lifted to have her comfortably settled, or, at least, disposed of. I thought they both looked better. But I have a special theory about Laura. I suppose you'll laugh at me." "Oh, no." "I wish you would sometimes," she said wistfully, "so only you laughed. My idea is that Laura was in love with that poor little Trumble, too." "What?" He looked up at that. "Yes, girls fall in love with anybody. I fancy she cared very deeply for him, but I think she's a strong, sane woman now. She's about the steadiest, coolest person I know, and I know her better lately than I used to. I think she made up her mind that she'd not sit down and mope over her unhappiness, and that she'd get over what caused it. And she took the very best remedy. She began going about, going everywhere, and she went gaily, too. And I'm sure she's cured. I'm sure she doesn't care the snap of her fingers for Wade Trumble or any man alive. She's having a pretty good time, I imagine. She has everything in the world except money, and she's never cared at all about that. She's young, and she dresses well these days, and she's one of the handsomest girls in town. She plays like a poet, and she dances well." "Yes," said Richard, reflectively, "she does dance well." "And from what I hear from Mrs. Villard," continued his mother, "I guess she has enough young men in love with her to keep any girl busy." He was interested enough to show some surprise. "In love with Laura?" "4, I hear." The best of women are sometimes the readiest with impromptu statistics. "Well, well," he said mildly. "You see, Laura has taken to smiling on the world, and the world smiles back at her. It's not a bad world about that, Richard." "No," he sighed, "I suppose not." "But there's more than that in this case, my dear son." "Is there?" The intelligent and gentle matron laughed as though at some unexpected turn of memory, and said: "Speaking of Hedrick, did you ever hear the story of the Devil of Lisieux, Richard?" "I think not. At least, I don't remember it." "Lisieux is a little town in Normandy," she said. I was there a few days with your father, one summer, long ago. It's a country full of old stories, folklore, and traditions, and the people still believe in the old scratch pretty literally. This legend was of the time when he came to Lisieux. The people knew he was coming because a wise woman had said that he was on the way, and predicted that he would arrive at the time of the great fair. Everybody was in great distress, because they knew that whoever looked at him would become bewitched, but of course they had to go to the fair. The wise woman was able to give them a little comfort. She said someone was coming with the devil, and that the people must not notice the devil, but keep their eyes fastened on this other. Then they would be free of the fiend's influence. But when the devil arrived at the fair, nobody even looked to see who his companion was, for the devil was so picturesque, so vivid, all in flaming scarlet and orange, and he capered and danced and sang so that nobody could help looking at him, and after looking once they couldn't look away until they were thoroughly under his spell. So they were all bewitched, and began to scream and howl and roll on the ground, and turn on each other and brawl, and commit all manner of excesses. Then the wise woman was able to exorcise the devil, and he sank into the ground. But his companion stayed, and the people came to their senses, and looked, and they saw that it was an angel. The angel had been there all the time that the fiend was, of course. So they have a saying now, that there may be angels with us, but we don't notice them when the devil's about. She did not look at her son as she finished, and she had hurried through the latter part of her legend with increasing timidity. The parallel was more severe, now that she put it to him, than she intended. It sounded savage, and she feared she had overshot her mark. Laura, of course, was the other, the companion. She had been actually a companion for the vivid sister, everywhere with her at the fair, and never considered. Now she emerged from her overshadowed obscurity, and people were able to see her as an individual. Heretofore she had been merely the retinue of a flaming Cora, but the legend was not very gallant to Cora. Mrs. Lindley knew that it hurt her son. She felt it without looking at him, and before he gave a sign. As it was, he did not speak, but after a few moments rose and went quietly out of the room. Then she heard the front door open and close. She sat by his fire a long, long time, and was sorry, and wondered. When Richard came home from his cold night prowl in the snowy streets, he found a sheet of notepaper upon his pillow. Dearest Richard, I didn't mean that anybody you ever cared for was a devil. I only meant that often the world finds out that there are lovely people it hasn't noticed. He reproached himself then, for the reproach his leaving her had been. He had a susceptible and annoying conscience, this unfortunate Richard. He found it hard to get to sleep that night, and was kept awake long after he had planned how he would make up to his mother for having received her legend so freezingly. What kept him awake, after that, was a dim, rhythmic sound coming from the house next door, where a holiday dance was in progress. Music far away and slender. Fiddle, cello, horn, bassoon, drums, all rollicking away almost the night long, seeping through the walls to his restless pillow. Finally, when belated drowsiness came, the throbbing tunes mingled with his half-dreams, and he heard the light shuffling of multitudinous feet over the dancing floor, and became certain that Laura's were among them. He saw her, gliding, swinging, laughing, and happy, and the picture did not please him. It seemed to him that she would have been much better employed sitting in black to write of a hopeless love. Coquetting with 4 suitors was not only inconsistent, it was unbecoming. It suited Cora's style, but in Laura it was outrageous. When he woke, in the morning, he was dreaming of her, dressed as Parthenia, beautiful, and throwing roses to an acclaiming crowd through which she was borne on a shield upon the shoulders of 4 Antinoses. Richard thought it scandalous. His indignation with her had not worn off when he descended to breakfast, but he made up to his mother for having troubled her. Then, to cap his gallantry, he observed that several inches of snow must have fallen during the night. It would be well packed upon the streets by noon. He would get a sleigh, after lunch, and take her driving. It was a holiday. She thanked him, but half declined. "I'm afraid it's too cold for me, but there are lots of nice girls in town, Richard, who won't mind weather." "But I asked you." It was finally left an open question for the afternoon to settle, and, upon her urging, he went out for a walk. She stood at the window to watch him, and when she saw that he turned northward she sank into a chair, instead of going to give Joe Varden his after-breakfast instructions, and fell into a deep reverie. Outdoors it was a biting cold morning, wind-swept and gray, and with air so frosty pure no one might breathe it and stay bilious; neither in body nor bilious in spirit. It was a wind to sweep the yellow from jaundiced cheeks and make them rosy; a wind to clear dulled eyes. It was a wind to lift foolish hearts, to lift them so high they might touch heaven and go winging down the sky, the wildest of wild geese. When the bell rang, Laura was kneeling before the library fire, which she had just kindled, and she had not risen when Sarah brought Richard to the doorway. She was shabby enough, poor Cinderella, looking up, so frightened, when her prince appeared. She had not been to the dance. She had not 4 suitors. She had none. He came toward her. She rose and stepped back a little. Ashes had blown upon her, and oh, the old, old thought of the woman born to be a mother! She was afraid his clothes might get dusty if he came too close. But to Richard she looked very beautiful, and a strange thing happened. Trembling, he saw that the firelight upon her face was brighter than any firelight he had ever seen. End of Chapter 25. End of The Flirt by Booth Tarkington. Recording by Lee Smalley.